Chapter 588. Return. I unhesitatingly returned from my personal bug-like world. I had already torn all pretense of cordiality with conservation. If I stayed here any longer, I would only be waiting to be surrounded and attacked. That wouldn't even be foolish anymore. It would be suicidal. The next instant, I appeared in the sky above Yellow Sand City by myself. Countless aerial knight and mages were around me, confused as to what was going on. They had received an emergency alarm and flew into the sky. However, the culprit had suddenly vanished. The young knight that appeared before them seemed to be a friend, not an enemy. The leading aerial knight tried to ask what had happened. "Your Excellency, back off. It's not over yet." His cautious question was met with an angry reprimand. The yellow-crowned aerial knight's face showed anger, but before he could say anything dissatisfied, he lost the ability to speak. The leading aerial knight clutched his own throat as his eyes rolled back into his head, and he started foaming at the mouth. He didn't even have the chance to scream before he was directly killed by himself. The other mages and aerial knight had the same fate. They either pulled out their swords and committed suicide or crushed their vitals. All of them died pitiful deaths as they mysteriously fell from the sky. What kind of curse is this? Who knows? Curses aren't the elves' specialty in magic. Perhaps it's just the remnant power of a domain. They don't have magic resistance like you do. I suddenly understood. The aura of the curse was still lingering in the sky. Although Lasnina's cursed creatures had been dragged into that world, just the remnant power left behind would be far beyond what these novice tieflings could deal with. This was just like fighting against an ice mage or the water elemental god. Perhaps the two would be fine, but the people affected would either freeze to death, die from water disasters, or die from exhaustion. The city below was now in a panic. Large numbers of people abandoned everything and madly ran out of the city. In the eyes of an experienced elderly person, this city was hopeless since two powerful existences from the mortal plane had chosen it as their battlefield. TSK. I was quite displeased as I flapped my wings and flew into the clouds. Roland. As expected, Lasnina's reaction appeared behind me the very next moment. That world didn't have the ability to trap anyone. Lasnina only needed about 10 seconds to find her way. Originally, I only wanted to change the battlefield, but when I stepped into the clouds, a sudden thought made me pause. Ice magic is an advanced form of water magic. In the magic theories of the He world, although there is no cloud magic, dark clouds are indeed an extension of water magic. Perhaps, he stepped into the clouds, condensed the water vapor into ice, and casually shot backwards. Roland! The roar behind me seemed to indicate that I had hit something. Hence, I specifically traveled through the clouds. Wherever I passed by, it was as if flowers were blooming. There was a rain of ice needles, and ice bullets. The ice crystals that I could summon at any time wouldn't have much killing power. However, I had never hoped that I would be able to kill Lasnina so easily. What I need is just Lon cowered. Lasnina herself didn't seem to notice anything at all. Doubtlessly, my freezing aura had already been effective. Her sense of time had been slowed down. Still, just this alone wasn't enough to make up for the absolute difference in power levels between us. I had left my ice magic in the clouds. Every time I pierced through Lasnina, the freezing aura would bring her closer to death. Perhaps I had found a new battle tactic that would be quite effective. The slowing down of time naturally greatly reduced Lasnina's speed. Meanwhile, I intentionally slowed down and maintained some distance between us. This was the most basic kiting tactic that Lasnina couldn't catch up to. I can't catch up. Has my speed been slowed down? Lasnina dripped a drop of blood into the air. Seeing that it was falling down faster than she expected, she was certain that her sense of time had been slowed down. Her stuttering words were rather comical, but they revealed astonishing information. Did she know about my abilities? That was impossible. My combat characteristics and abilities were all top secret. Anyone who had ever seen my freezing aura should be dead. No, there were still some who were alive and well. Conservation. There was no need to think too much about it. Even though I hadn't revealed my abilities yet, I had already revealed many of my abilities during my 2 fights against conservation. The loss of information put me on the defensive. My plan to set up a trap to kill Lasnina was now ruined. Lasnina now had the initiative. What would Lasnina do if she knew that her sense of time had been messed up? Would she charge up and attack me? That would be a huge disadvantage. Would she dodge and wait for the effects to wear off? Then, I would have long since fled. My senses were constantly locked onto the person following me. At that moment, Lasnina's aura suddenly weakened and vanished without a trace. She then reappeared, but this time she seemed to be much weaker. Suicide? Or did she tear off a part of herself? I couldn't tell. Lasnina seemed to have broken free from the freezing aura's influence. But no matter what, it was always best to keep my distance. If she wanted to catch up to me, she would have to suffer another slowing down of time. Suddenly, Lasnina turned around and flew back in the direction she had come from. Was she going back to find Sand City? Ha, who do you think I am? Would Yongye care about the lives of these small fries? That woman said that you know how to. Yongye is far weaker than an ordinary undead emperor. I can't believe that he would actually sympathize and like mortals. At this moment, I finally understood the saying that the person who understood you the most would always be your enemy. Damn it. Just as I was about to turn around, I suddenly tumbled 3 times in a row. A magic sword that reached out from the clouds almost pierced through my heart. A blood-red venomous snake reached out from the clouds. Her sudden attack was swift and accurate, It was as if she had long since locked onto my location and was waiting to ambush me. As I glanced around, I saw Lasnina's figure in the clouds. The bone-fire skull in her hand had a cross-shaped hellfire that was locked onto me. This was a magical compass that had locked onto my life aura. Conservation, does she really have to hate me so much? It was obvious that Conservation knew that I could leave this world at any moment. It would be quite difficult for her to take me down with her. From the very start, she had hoped that I would ask for her help if I met a powerful enemy. She had prepared a method to help me. Of course, she would help my enemy, even if she had to die with her. Information, small tools, and what else? This time, I had shot myself in the foot. I had underestimated Conservation's hatred for me. Women were truly mystical creatures that didn't have any sense of reason. Let's go all out. Harloise flew up by herself. She also knew that the current situation was quite bad. Was she intending to attack? Not only were we facing Lasnina, we were also facing Conservation's abilities. It would be impossible to not be careful. Roland, Little Red's balls are moving. Chapter 589. There were 3 major misconceptions in life. Someone's looking for me, my cell phone rang, she likes me, I can counterattack. But when Harloise informed me that Little Red had actually woken up at this time, I became certain that this wasn't a misconception. My chance has come. I really can counterattack. I was quite familiar with Little Red's power level. The foundational part of leveling up was to retain most of one's previous power level. Most people would only become stronger. In that case, if I worked together with Little Red, it was highly likely that I would be able to counterattack. The dragon egg in my backpack kept jumping about. Its fiery red mana waves kept jumping about like ocean waves. Its powerful life force was like a volcano about to erupt. There was no mistaking it. Little Red had finished leveling up and was about to break out of her egg. I grit my teeth and tossed the dragon egg out as I watched my pursuers get closer and closer. Lasnina hurriedly dodged due to the incredibly high magical reaction. She also needed to be on guard against forbidden spell scrolls or magical explosion crystals. It's you, the Iron Tyrannosaurus Little Fire Dragon? As I expected, fiery clouds covered the dragon egg in the sky. What appeared in the sky was a mighty and domineering little fire dragon. Its body was less than 1.5 meters long, and it had a round belly and head. Its red dragon wings were flapping slowly, and when it yawned, it spat out a small flame. It was indeed a cute little fire dragon. Ein Mises? The confused little fire dragon turned its head in confusion. It was as if a bean-sized question mark had appeared on its head. No matter what her leveling up was, there was obviously something wrong with her cute appearance, wasn't there? An abnormal silence appeared on the battlefield. But the next instant, viper-shaped magical blades covered the entire sky. Lasnina definitely wouldn't be in a daze on the battlefield. Little Red, who had just recovered from her daze, paused in surprise when she saw the vicious demoness approaching her. Then, she started panicking. Jie. What a strange word. Could it be that Little Red was so shocked that she lost the ability to speak? Damn it. I was also astonished by this sudden development. However, I knew that if I waited a few more seconds, it would have been murder. A silver sword light clashed violently against the blood-red magic sword. The dragon-armored knight charged right in front of Lasnina's little fire dragon. This was the first time that Lasnina and I had ever faced each other head-on. He didn't even need to raise his head to see that the sky was filled with whip marks, and behind him was a dense horde of cursed creatures. It had only been an instant since they started fighting, but he was already at a disadvantage. Too fast, Lasnina's magic sword had already surpassed the limits of what ordinary creatures could react to. Even a top-level human martial artist, a sword saint, would be nothing in front of a devil lord who had trained for thousands of years. The scene of a one-sided beating played out once again. The magic sword was like a whip that was everywhere. It was just as disgusting as Lasnina's maniacal laughter. The next moment, an ice wall appeared in front of me. Although it was instantly shattered by the magic sword, it gave me a chance to catch my breath. I didn't have the ability to forcefully cast a spell while being attacked by a devil lord. Red fireballs, black gravity bombs, and snow-white ice bombs. In that instant, the entire sky was filled with all kinds of offensive spells. Harloise. I turned around and looked at Harloise. Perhaps it was because her opponent this time was far too troublesome, or perhaps it was because Harloise finally had enough power, but the flying black cat was floating in midair. The several dozen magic arrays behind her kept spitting out all kinds of magic balls. The black cat with bat wings seemed just like a witch from a western fairy tale. She was holding a small magic wand in one of her paws and constantly waving it around. She also wore a magical hat and a small cape that buffed her strength. Her other paw kept flashing as she held a silver magical sand. She looked rather comical, but even more so, cute. The several dozen magic arrays kept spinning as if they were alive. However, they were actually under the cat's control as they collided with each other and changed. Fireballs, flame explosion, great fire all, fire array, dragon breath, lightning strike, lightning ball, and chain lightning. These magic arrays were all of the same power level, but they were now higher-level offensive spells. The most inconceivable part was that these magic arrays actually didn't use up any of her mana at all. Instead, they entered an endless cycle of their own. Harloise's attack helped me regain my senses. The silly cat was now at the myth rank and was no weaker than she had been in the past. When considering her past experiences and age, it was likely that she had already surpassed Little Red. A magical version of a perpetual motion machine? What kind of joke is that? It's just a simple application of the balance of the four elements. Stop studying it. It's not like you'll ever be able to learn it in your entire lifetime. Harloise had added even more tricks to the ordinary low-level elemental spells. Just by looking at them, she was able to tell that they were far beyond the ordinary four elements. She had high-level elven secret moon star magic, alchemist's metal decomposition and disintegration magic, and troll witch doctor's witchcraft curses. Now that the silly cat was no longer restricted by her undead body, Harloise was able to unleash all of her accumulated power over tens of thousands of years. The sky was filled with magic bullets of various colors, making it seem like an exhibition of all magic systems. Every type of magic came from a different magic system. Different magic bullets would require different methods of dealing with them. Delayed explosions, curved attacks, cluster bombs, ricocheting bombs, and so on. The sky became a drawing board that a willful child was casually scribbling on. I looked at the dizzying magic arrays and magic spells that filled the sky. Although most of them were mid-level and low-level spells that were no higher than the fourth circle, I was still unable to understand more than half of them. I once again confirmed why Harloise was called the all-knowing one. Perhaps this silly cat had been limited by her power level for so many years, and it was finally time for her to make a comeback. Even an entire angel army would be instantly annihilated by such a large-scale cannon fire. However, a devil lord would be far more difficult to deal with than an angel army. Lasnina's berserk magic sword began to casually tear open dimensional cracks as countless cursed creatures fell from them. Some of these cursed creatures became Lasnina's meat shields, while others actively welcomed the magic spells and began devouring the pure mana. Perhaps special methods would be required to deal with these magic spells directly, but summoning cannon fodder to sacrifice themselves seemed to be the simplest and most violent method. Harloise seemed to know that her magic bullets would be unable to pose any fatal threat to Lasnina. She simply continued to chant an incantation. However, Harloise was angrily rebuking her through our soul connection. "Idiot, don't just stand there and watch. Can't you see that I'm chanting an incantation? Go and act as a cannon fodder, a meat shield." Alright, my sword techniques were being suppressed, and my mana level was being suppressed. It seemed that my most useful ability right now was my turtle shell. I smiled wryly as I instantly appeared in front of Lasnina. It seemed that I would have to act as a meat shield after all. At this moment, the previously forgotten little fire dragon, Little Red, suddenly appeared in front of Lasnina and spat out a fireball. Chapter 590. In their own words, the dragons leveling up was an improvement in their natural talents brought about by natural selection. In the eyes of mages, it was a type of specific evolution that started from within their genes. Perhaps a more crude way of describing it would be the most practical. Go back to your mother's womb and reconstruct yourself. This was a type of choice. Naturally, there would be an improvement as well as a regression. After leveling up, the dragons would fight as if they were a completely different dragon. However, most situations were still predictable. The great majority of leveling up would strengthen their strengths and make up for their weaknesses. And for dragons, who had no weaknesses to begin with, strengthening their strengths would be the most obvious. What type of leveling up will Little Red choose? Even if I didn't ask her, I could faintly guess that this was directly related to her personal talent. Dragons' physical combat and magical abilities would improve as they grew older. This unique advantage of their species also made them lack the motivation to work hard at cultivation. I've spent more than 100 years painstakingly studying magic, but the amount of magical knowledge I've obtained is less than 200 years' worth of mana just by taking a nap and sleeping. Why am I working so hard? The world had always been unfair. Some races had individuals that were born weak and had short lifespans. They needed to pass down their legacies and cultivate to become stronger. Some races were born at the top of the food chain, but they naturally lost the spirit to improve. However, Little Red was somewhat different. Ein Mises, Varen's destroyer, immemorial red dragon, dragon queen, and wind and fire dual element grandmaster. She seemed to be well versed in both the pen and the sword, but it was actually quite obvious that she was a dragon. The dragon's martial arts techniques, wing sweep, tail sweep, sharp fangs and claws, and at worst, vicious dog pounce and lazy donkey roll. Calling them martial arts techniques would probably make other species warriors want to cry. But with their species' natural talents of great physical strength, Even other species' sword saints might not be able to defeat them. After all, martial arts techniques were essentially techniques that used the physical body. If the difference in physical strength was too great for martial arts techniques to make up for, then no amount of training would be of any use. Techniques needed to be inherited and practiced in actual combat. Dragons' martial arts techniques relied more on their natural talents, which naturally wouldn't be enough to satisfy Little Red, who desperately needed power to complete her revenge. Little Red was able to defeat Molly, who was much older than her, in melee combat due to her roguelike equipment and the advantages of being young and energetic. But looking at it from a melee combat standpoint, Little Red was no different from other dragons who relied on their natural talent. Even though red dragons were considered combat experts among dragons, there was still no foundational difference between Little Red and Molly. The only difference was that red dragons had faster reactions, sharper claws, and thicker skin. This was also the foundational reason why giants of the same power level would always be able to defeat dragons. Since there was not much of a difference in physical conditions, humanoid creatures that used tools, techniques, and brains to fight had an obvious advantage over beasts that relied on their instincts. Of course, as the dragons grew older, these small problems would no longer be a problem. Moreover, the advancement of the dragons would also make their already ridiculous bodies even more ridiculous, which could be considered as forcefully making up for their flaws. Little Red had never had the habit of sleeping in and waiting to become stronger. She spent all her time and energy on wind and fire magic. Fire magic was the foundational magic of red dragons. Red dragons were born as the strongest fire-type creatures in all of Ike's mortal planes. Red dragons were also capable of increasing their magic power in their sleep. However, not only did red dragons have no advantage when it came to wind-type magic, their powerful fire-type magic would also affect their control over wind-type magic. It was likely that red dragons would have to spend several times more effort to reach the standard of other species. Very few people knew that Little Red's fire magic had faintly reached the level of myth-ranked human mages. Not only that, her wind magic was even higher than that. In the mage country, Little Red would also be able to reach the level of a Truth Symposium mage with the advantage of dual cultivation. Plus, Little Red's mana reserves far surpassed that of ordinary human mages by several dozen times. Out of the 4 elements, 1 + 1 would be greater than 3 when used together. Wind and fire magic were both experts in arson. If Little Red used a forbidden spell with both elements, it would basically be an unsalvageable super forbidden spell. I thought that Little Red didn't have many opportunities to cast spells because her dual cultivation magic was far too destructive. If she wasn't careful, then Sulphur Mountain City would be burned down. At the very least, when we were adventuring, we often had to run away in the middle of the night because of the fires she caused. During our adventuring, Little Red's area of effect attack power far surpassed everyone else's. She was a true large-scale killing machine, and she also helped me and Adam a lot. There was no helping it, as we were supposed to be meat shields. In real life, there was no such thing as teammate protection. The frontliners would always be the ones taking fire from both sides. The seemingly young fire dragon opened her mouth and spat out a dark red fireball with a hint of gold. This round fireball seemed to be physical, and it seemed like a rolling red bead as it flew through the air. Although it seemed small and exquisite, the energy contained within it far surpassed that of any mortal mage's highest level 9th circle spell. Shing. The twisted cursed creature acted as an expendable meat shield in front of the fireball. However, the fireball silently pierced through it. The equally powerful twisted creature didn't even get a chance to scream before it was directly pierced through. This seemingly cute and harmless fireball didn't seem to receive any resistance at all. It continued to approach Lasnina at a seemingly slow speed. Blood-red liquid dripped down from Lasnina's eyes. Lasnina raised her head and opened her eyes, which had now become 2 empty sockets. She opened her mouth and screamed soundlessly. The next instant, the entire world began to shake as if countless banshees were singing death cries right next to my ears. Numerous cursed creatures jumped out of dimensional cracks. These disgusting and smelly creatures piled up into a disgusting mountain of flesh. If one isn't enough, then let's use even more. Although this was quite a simple way of thinking, it was quite effective most of the time. Using cannon fodder to exhaust the enemy's magic was already a common tactic. As long as there was enough cannon fodder, even the strongest incantation or magic would be exhausted. As expected, the round fireball pierced through another cursed creature, then two and finally shattered when it reached the seventh cursed creature. And then, boom. After a thunderous explosion, it was as if a volcano was erupting. Sparks flew several hundred meters high and were quite eye-catching. However, the thunderstorm and chain lightning mixed within were even more fatal and dangerous. Large numbers of cursed creatures were either roasted into black ash or electrocuted to death. They all died in large numbers. This seemingly simple fireball was actually a composite forbidden spell that had been repeatedly compressed and accumulated. Judging from the power of this attack alone, Little Red hadn't failed in her attempt to level up. However, Lasnina smiled cruelly. No matter how powerful this attack was, even if more than half of her summoned creatures had been sacrificed, it had at least managed to stop her. The next instant, however, her smile froze over. The little red dragon opened its mouth and spat out a small fireball that was exactly the same as the previous one. Before Lasnina could summon another meat shield, Little Red took another deep breath and spat out another fireball, 2 fireballs, 3 fireballs, 10 fireballs, 100 fireballs. By the time Little Red finally stopped with smoke coming out of her mouth, there were already several thousand fireballs in the sky. Just like a swarm of bees, the fireballs seemed slow but were actually quite fast as they chased after Lasnina. And then there was Lasnina was completely unable to use teleportation magic to escape due to the restrictions of Harlow's dimensional anchor spell. When the swarm of fireballs caught up to Lasnina's target, countless explosions filled Lasnina's eyes of despair. If Lasnina's earlier curse had been shaking the world, then Little Red's chain of fireballs would have been destroying the world. Moments later, when the smoke and thunder dissipated, only a pitch-black spatial crack remained. The scene outside the crack was nothing but endless darkness and nothingness. Even the Chaos Abyss, which was famed for its sturdiness, was unable to withstand such a furious bombardment. Even if conservation had revealed information about me, it would be impossible for her to have information about Harlow's and the newly evolved Little Red. Where's Lasnina? Did she go back and revive already? The next instant, a snake blade extended from the spatial crack and answered my question. Clang. A sneak attack would be meaningless against me. After our swords clashed, I discovered to my delight that my opponent was weakened. I let go of my right hand and grabbed my sword with my left hand. I pulled, and a black item was pulled out. The Devil Lord that had been hiding in the darkness was pulled out as if she was fishing a fish. Her current appearance was quite unsightly. Only half of her body remained, and more than half of her head remained. She had lost both hands, and her snake blade was only wrapped around her arm. But at this moment, those empty eye sockets were still glaring at me. The hatred in them were endless. Kill me, and then I'll come back for revenge. This was a resolute will that didn't need to be doubted. It was also the most disgusting part about devils and demons. What are you looking at? If you keep looking, and I'll drink you up. But how could I possibly give such a difficult opponent a second chance? Perhaps I was only a low-level mage, but I had a very, very high-level magic that I was probably the best at in the world. And this magic was the natural enemy of all existences that were indestructible. Seal of the 4 elements, the mana in my right hand was pure ice elemental power. However, after some adjustments, it transformed into the elemental power of water. Little Red Dragon opened her mouth wide. The Crimson Magic Array and the Cyan Magic Array brought about the elemental power of wind and elemental power of fire. As for the final elemental power of earth, Harlois, who was an all-element mage, would provide me with that. Naturally, there was a huge difference in difficulty between a single boss and a group boss. Sleep for me until the next, and the next century. The 4 elemental powers' elemental power was connected to each other. Thousands of mana threads connected to each other, and the balance of the elements reached a state of harmony. Lasnina had an expression of disbelief as the 4 elemental powers devoured her, and the dimensional crack in the world began to close. The seal of the 4 elements, which had been improved over and over again, had already surpassed the Creator Goddess' original version. It was likely that even until the next century, the Devil Lord's throne would still be empty. The next second, all the Devil Lords were either astonished or terrified. They instinctively sensed that the Lord of Curses' throne would be empty for an extended period of time. Lasnina? She disappeared? Chapter 591. This was a translucent crystal gem that was only the size of a walnut. Under the sunlight, it reflected all the colors of the rainbow. At the core of the gem was a transparent female figure that was currently sleeping peacefully. Her usual devilish beauty was now so calm, as if she was an angel in a beautiful dream. This gem was far more beautiful than any natural or magical gem. Natural light reflected from it gave off the flavor of holy light. Words like purity, kindness, and holy item were probably created just for this gem. Lasnina's cursed gem, God-level mystical item. It represents the source of all curses in the world of Achi. Lasnina, the Lord of Curses, is sealed within this gem. The devils would definitely be willing to pay several dimensional levels worth of wealth in exchange for her. Of course, your head is also included. P.S. If you offer this gem to the Glorious System, you'll receive an interest-free loan of 10,000 fate points. Even though this gem was made of the dirtiest material, it looked so holy and beautiful. If it wasn't for the fact that my system was always so mischievous and immoral, I would have never dared to believe it. This beautiful gem attracted the gazes of countless females as I placed it in my palm. The dragon and cat nearby wiped their drool. Forget about Little Red, as it was natural for her to like shiny things, but why was the silly cat getting involved? I'm going to sue you for racial discrimination. Isn't jewelry supposed to be a gift from the heavens to women? I strongly demand a salary and a bonus. You black-hearted boss, I've already worked for you for several hundred years, and you haven't even paid me a single cent, actually, including the Yongye era. The past several hundred years had all been true. But who in the undead army had ever been paid a salary? I finally understood why the evil factions were always unable to defeat the regular armies. They didn't receive any salary or benefits. If they won, they wouldn't receive any bonuses. If they lost, they might even obtain freedom and a new identity. Such an army naturally had no motivation. I retracted my thoughts as I waved my hand in boredom. I told her to go play wherever she wanted to play. Weren't magical pets supposed to be mages' lifelong free laborers that didn't need to be paid? If she wanted Robbie Luo to give her a salary, that would probably happen in her next life. And then, as always, a cat had appeared on my head. Once the seal of the 4 elements was completed, it would seal that existence into an artifact. And that artifact would likely have many wondrous uses. For example, the fire elemental seal back in the day would constantly leak fire elemental power and become an eternally active volcano. When considering Lasnina's abilities, even though this gemstone seemed astonishingly charming, an ordinary person would die within a week at most if they tried to use it. I was certain that the reason why the 3 women desired this gemstone so much wasn't because of its characteristics. It said that Lasnina was born as a fallen angel. I didn't expect the legend to be true. A single Devil Lord sealing stone is already so beautiful. If I can find a bunch of them and make them into necklaces, a group? Necklace? There were only 4 of them left in the entire world. They were extremely rare. You can't indiscriminately catch rare species. Of course, they were just saying that. Lasnina's sealing stone was only like this because of her personal characteristic. He placed the gemstone on top of his head, and the radiance that penetrated through was colorful. Maybe we really need to collect a few more devil's stones. Looking at this penetrating radiance and feeling the power contained within it, I couldn't help but mutter. This gem has a light attribute? Why do I only feel pure curse power? I shook my head. In the natural world, the more beautiful something was, the more vicious it would be. This gemstone would probably be able to poison an entire city of people to death just by soaking it in water. However, it had nothing to do with the light attribute at all. I need the materials for the other magic sword, the undead sword with the strongest attack power. My greatest undead magic masterpiece was the 7 original sins, which represented the negative emotions of intelligent lifeforms. The 7 original sins had far too many similarities with the Devil Lord. Since they were both powers that originated from the dark side of the soul and negative emotions, if I could use the Devil Lord's materials to create a sword, perhaps it would be even more effective than using pure undead materials. Since I have the materials, let's try making a mold first. I casually put away the gemstone as well as the shards on the ground in a snakeskin bag. These shards were probably the most valuable shards in the world. There were more than a dozen black and red shards. Some were rusty and some were covered in dust. Magic sword Sastia, snake tail whipper. The moment that Lasnina collapsed, countless vengeful souls escaped from the sword. That scene was even more spectacular than any forbidden spell. That was all that was left of this god equipment. The demon's sword had already fused with Lasnina. After Lasnina was sealed away, the soul material that was originally bound by the demon's sword naturally regained its freedom, and the demon's sword that was left behind naturally disintegrated into pieces. Many myth-ranked and semi-god individuals who died unnaturally would have their myth-ranked weapons damaged as a part of their bodies. But even so, this was still an excellent material, especially since I had Lasnina's soulstone in my possession. Now, as long as I used this soulstone as the core, I could create a mana cycle, and then use the magic sword's shards as the sword's blade. I could expect that I would be able to restore at least 40% of my original power. I strongly protest against the black-hearted team leader for stealing my equipment. Not only did you not split the equipment after defeating a boss, you even stole a necklace exclusive to women. You bastard team leader for stealing gold and equipment. Give me back my hard-earned money. I picked up the silly cat who was protesting while holding a sign and casually tossed it away. That's right, there was an additional benefit to doing this. As long as this soulstone became a part of my magic sword, it was likely that Lasnina wouldn't even have a chance to escape before my lifespan ended. If only I could gather a few devil lords. Perhaps I'll die even more spectacularly than Lasnina's death. I turned around and saw that a certain someone was still eagerly looking at the soulstone. Yep, a certain person, a certain dragon. Pfft. I finally couldn't help but chuckle out loud. Haha, I'm Mises. Are you intending on pretending to be a lowly and sneaking into an adventuring team again? You still haven't thrown away your dragon princess adventures in the human world? Currently, Little Red was so angry that her face was completely red. She appeared to be around 8 or 9 years old. She was standing on her tiptoes and doing her best to maintain the dignity of dragons that had long since disappeared. She was also carefully wrapping up her small body with a tattered piece of cloth. The greatest contributor to our victory, the glorious red dragon Mises, was currently a young girl who was doing her best to hold onto the cloth so that she wouldn't be exposed. How would I have known that this evolution would result in me becoming a dragon egg again? Damned dragon gods, they didn't even explain this clearly in their inheritance. The energy-devouring rainbow dragon was the dragon that Ein-Mesis had chosen to evolve into. And since she had obtained the dragon god's inheritance, she was especially thorough in her evolution. I mean, she was especially thorough in reconstructing herself in her mother's womb. Dragon egg, young dragon, young dragon, young dragon, adult dragon, extremely old dragon, immemorial dragon. Little Red instantly became the main character of her story of rebirth. Of course, dragons still had their source power, so it would be quite fast for them to evolve from the beginning again. It took Little Red X thousands of years to reach this step and become an immemorial dragon from the beginning again. If it was purely natural growth, it would probably only take slightly more than 100 years. Perhaps this was nothing more than a rather long afternoon nap for dragons, but for Ein-Mesis, who had long since given up on eternal sleep, this was a nightmare. Ha ha ha, don't you like naughty children? This time, you can be a naughty child on your own. Is this the proverb of looking for a mummy but becoming a mummy yourself? Wait a moment, what are you doing? That fireball is going to kill someone. The age of one's physical body would imperceptibly affect many things. It was indeed rather dangerous for a naughty child to spit out fire like a dragon. But when I turned around and saw Little Red's current appearance, I stretched out my hand and gestured to her waist, causing me to smile proudly. At the very least, the current Ein-Mesis would probably be especially suited for lace princess dresses for quite a long period of time. And then, with a sky full of fireballs as proof, my taunt succeeded. Hey, if you keep burning, I'm really going to turn on you. I'm the nemesis of naughty children in Sulphur Mountain City. Be careful that I don't steal your lollipop. But when the little princess, who had tears in her eyes, spat out a dozen compressed fireballs, I decided to behave myself. Yep, when I meet up with Adam and the others in 2 days, we'll have a celebration party together. It's better to have fun together than to have fun alone. Everyone should be happy together. A Little Red is so pitiful. No matter which bar you're having your celebration party in, it's probably already destined to become ruins. I did my best to keep a straight face, but when I saw that angry little face of hers, I couldn't help but laugh out loud at the thought of the mature woman in the past. After a while, under the threat of those abnormal fireballs, I took 2 deep breaths. I had had enough fun. Sorry. You can ask Marguerite to make something like a time necklace or something. Hearing this, Little Red paused in surprise. Her face was filled with a look of, damn, it's that easy? Why didn't I think of that just now? And the next instant, she looked at me with a threatening gaze. You should have one on you, right? Robbery. Let me use it first. Don't even think about it. Just wait to be mocked by Adam and the others. Haha, just watch how you mocked me back then. I'll return it to you. I'll return it to you 10 times over. Wahahaha. Chapter 592. Chaos would forever be the main theme of the Chaos Abyss. But no matter how chaotic a place was, there would always be a relatively safe place. The Ashen Furnace was a city located in the Ashen Plains, the 100th level of the Chaos Abyss. It was a place that all dimensional travelers had to pass through. The Ashen Furnace was a land of giants, the roofs of the gigantic metal houses couldn't be seen, and the endless giant houses covered half of the plain. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing but a twisted gray and black metal sky. Along with the constant thick smoke and metal clanking sounds, the entire city was like a gigantic furnace. Some people said that this was the Titan Giants' ruins, but these houses were too large for the Titan Giants to live in. Some people said that this was a part of the mechanical plane, but they were unable to explain why a Pure Land of Order's mechanical plane would appear in the Chaos Abyss. Just how many residents lived here? Nobody would be able to answer. The city had no city walls or borders, nor was there any need for them. It was just a small extension of the city. If you wanted to walk out on your own, you would need to prepare to die here for the rest of your life. It was said that the city was split into several thousand regions. Each region was no smaller than a human country. Each region had its own rules and main species. Sometimes, a metal shack would be the capital of a small species. There were no demon lords here. Instead, there were countless dark bosses sent here by countless factions. There were no laws or rules here, but very few adventurers here were weak. Being able to reach the depths of the Chaos Abyss was already proof of one's strength. This was a paradise for adventurers. Countless dimensional travelers would gather in the rivers of the Chaos Abyss. Countless miracles awaited them. Of course, the Lady of Misfortune would always come more often than the Goddess of Luck. Every year, countless new adventurers would disappear into the sewers and sewers of this mega city. And today, just like in the past, a new adventurer arrived, the 100th level of the Chaos Abyss, the 11th District's Dragontail Bar. I should be arriving soon, after I killed off the 3rd local hoodlum who pretended to be a kind-hearted person, and before Little Red lost her patience and killed off the 13th kidnapper. I felt like I had found the way. By the way, wasn't she just a young girl? Why were there so many gentlemen in this day and age? No, a true gentleman should only watch from afar. Anyone who dared to reach out to her didn't deserve the reputation of a gentleman. They deserved to have their 3rd leg kicked off by Little Red. Although I don't know why you suddenly have such a proud expression, let me remind you. This is already the 5th time you've said that you've found the way. And the first 4 times you've caused trouble. Heloise yawned. The first time, I walked into the territory of the Dark Elf. The 2nd time, I walked into the lair of the Frost Giant. The 3rd time, I barged into the Dark Cultist's illegal sacrificial ritual. Aren't there only 3 times? Have you forgotten about the Holy Night? Look at how crazy they are. If you hadn't thrown out the holy light in time, they would have killed you. Now that I mention this, I suddenly recalled that I had actually met an entire squadron of Holy Night Knights in the Chaos Abyss. This was truly a miraculous encounter. It was just that they seemed to be overly nervous. The moment I got close to them, they immediately drew their swords and attacked me. It was likely that the local residents of the Chaos Abyss had made them suffer. Even though I told them that I was a holy knight, they still didn't seem to have any intention of getting close to me. Their gazes were filled with vigilance, which was rather surprising. After all, no matter which god they served, or if they simply believed in the holy light, Holy Night Knights would always have a good relationship with each other due to the mutual understanding and respect between devout believers. Friends who could talk about how they were poor and didn't have any girls with them, and complain about why they chose the wrong profession back in the day would easily ignite a mysterious spark between them. It's probably an order from some god. They sent out more than 30 silver rank Holy Night Knights, 1 semi-god rank, and 2 myth rank knights at once. How generous! The holy emblems on these Holy Night Knights' armor and weapons had all been erased. This meant that not only were these holy knights here on a highly dangerous mission, they were also nameless knights that nobody would acknowledge or claim their bodies after they died. For a holy knight job class that valued honor above all else, this meant that they viewed the success or failure of their mission as more important than their own lives and honor. I was rather curious as to why a group of Holy Night Knights would abandon everything and come to the Chaos Abyss to die. Yep, I was just curious. I didn't intend to cause any trouble. I didn't see any clones of Heloise sneaking over. Is there any news? No. Those Holy Night Knights are so cautious that they don't even seem like Holy Night Knight. They didn't say anything at all. But judging from how they're constantly searching, they must be searching for something. In a city of chaos, power was the only way to pass. I wasn't in a hurry to meet up with Adam and the others, because according to the schedule, they were most likely still on the way. It would be quite interesting to take a stroll around this chaotic city with so many different species and cultures. However, our leisure time was once again interrupted by a blood-curdling scream. Awooh! I turned around to see a furry fellow rolling on the ground. Little Red was constantly kicking it with her tiny feet. The 14th? It sounds like a werewolf. Yep. If she kicks it a few more times, it'll probably become a pig-headed human. 16. Just now, an ogre and a berserker demon had their lower limbs broken. I could only helplessly shake my head as I looked at the increasingly angry dragon girl. It would have been fine if Little Red had chosen to transform into an elf or a beastman. However, a young human girl with soft skin and tender flesh would be quite rare in the Chaos Abyss. It wasn't that there weren't any young human girls who were incredibly powerful. However, this young human girl was only wearing a tattered piece of cloth and silently following behind a man. She looked just like a little slave who was following a slave trader. This wasn't because I had some sort of weird sense of humor. It was just that Little Red's body had changed so much that she couldn't even wear her original clothes anymore. In order to avoid any possible devil lords, we had been hurrying all the way here, so we hadn't had the time to buy some children's clothing. Little Red was still wearing that tattered cloth. Ever since we entered this city, Little Red had always lowered her head while facing the gazes of the other races. She didn't say a single word as she slowly followed me. She looked like a timid and weak little girl, which attracted the attention of the human traffickers. Actually, she was walking slowly because she had to cover her tattered cloth. Any wind would cause her to expose herself. She kept her head lowered and didn't say anything because she was furious. She was doing her best to suppress her draconic aura. Her lowered eyes had long since transformed into dragon eyes filled with flames that could shoot out beams of light at any moment. For the sake of my personal safety, I decided to stay far away from her. "You're taking revenge, aren't you?" I refuse to believe that it's such a coincidence that we didn't run into a single tailor shop on the way here. Also, you just happened to burn all your spare clothes while you were fooling around. That's right, I'm taking revenge. It's her fault for trying to make me become a laughingstock as well. After that day, we went through a difficult war and negotiation in order to fight for the right to become adults. In the end, we won by saying, "All your food is in my dimensional storage bag. Do you intend to starve to death in your flat young dragon form?" That was the shame of being a female dragon. As my trump card, I obtained victory. But how could I be at ease if I didn't find a chance to take revenge? Actually, she could have just transformed into a young dragon. I was greatly astonished and hurriedly used our soul connection to stop Harloise from saying anything. "Please don't say anything." I know. She's probably at the critical point right now. If she learns that all her suffering was unnecessary, and that she was most likely set up by you, she'll definitely explode in anger. I shook my head. That wasn't what I was thinking. Little Red was someone who would easily go to a dead end. Let's wait until we reach the Dragontail Tavern before telling her. That'll be much more dramatic. The silly cat paused in surprise before shaking her head helplessly. She was too lazy to participate in such a boring exchange between elementary school students. I didn't ask for directions, because revealing my destination to the residents here was obviously unwise. I had already been to the Dragontail Tavern twice. I should be able to find it if I looked around a bit more. "Are you certain that you're not intending to trick Little Red a bit longer?" "I'm just passing by." I won't be able to trick her for much longer. News travels quite quickly here. Soon, there won't be any more idiots coming here to die. News travels quickly? Harloise nodded thoughtfully. She didn't ask further, but she seemed to have realized what I was trying to say. Taverns were highly frequented. Many information peddlers and illegal merchants would set up shop in large taverns and bars. We chose the Dragontail Tavern as our meeting point because it was convenient and fast to obtain information. If we were lucky, we might even be able to use the information peddlers we were familiar with. As veteran adventurers, information was life, especially in an unfamiliar and hostile environment. If Adam and the others had arrived early, they would definitely have gathered information and bribed spies beforehand. Since our physical appearances hadn't changed, they would naturally receive information as soon as we entered the city. The reason why they made things so complicated was because, using myself as bait to fish. That's right, we were out in the open, while Adam was in the dark. Plus, we were entering the city separately. Those who weren't familiar with us wouldn't even know that we were on the same side. It would be such a pity to give up such a natural advantage. If there were any pursuers behind us, or if some powerful enemy had been waiting for us here for a long time, they would naturally be exposed as long as they sent someone to follow us. For example, I had previously offended devil lords, demon lords, undead emperors, chaos evil gods. As I counted the possible enemies, I could only sigh at how many friends I had, and how many people wanted to die for me. I kept feeling like this was a wise decision. If there was an appropriate opportunity, Adam could also be a backstabbing assassin. What if they didn't come? Or are you just being paranoid, and we don't have any enemies at all? Then let's just treat it as a form of entertainment to make Little Red suffer. At any rate, it's fun, isn't it? As far as the eye could see, Little Red seemed to have finally been enlightened. She began to take off the werewolf's armor, but she wrinkled her little nose after taking a sniff. Without any hesitation, she kicked the beastman's smelly armor into the air. At the same time, Harloise smiled mysteriously. Her eyes had been split into several hundred different parts. These were the perspectives of all the clones she had left behind. The cameras we had left behind all along the way had proved to be effective. The cat that seemed to be napping was actually observing the entire city. At this moment, one scene caught Harloise's attention. "Roland, you really weren't paranoid this time. It's probably thanks to your good luck that we managed to catch a whale." Chapter 593. It's actually him? I really didn't expect this. I had many enemies in the Chaos Abyss. I had offended the devils the most. I had just killed Losnina, so it was only natural that the remaining devil lords would band together to kill me. Apart from that, Sophocles the Deceiver was the most likely to come looking for trouble with me. It was only natural that my bastard younger brother would come looking for me, but I really didn't expect that he would come looking for me. Underneath the gray armor was a steel-like body. The black greatsword on his back was simple and ancient, yet it gave off an aura of existence that was impossible to ignore. This was a Chaos main god-level existence, war god Donades. Even though Donades had done his best to hide his divine aura, it was unlikely that this wasn't his true body. However, I had interacted with him in the Hades for so long, and I had collected plenty of information on his soul, magic, and divine power. How could he possibly hide from the greed Harloise? Why is it him? I was rather astonished. It was very rare for Chaos main gods to appear in the Chaos Abyss. They no longer had any needs or opportunities to improve themselves. They would spend most of their time enjoying their leisure time in their own dimensions. Now that the Chaos Abyss had entered the Holy War, it was highly unlikely that the Chaos Abyss War God, the vanguard of the Chaos Abyss, would hide his true identity and enter this city right after I entered. Since it wasn't a coincidence, then he was most likely here for me. A clone? An incarnation? It's not his true body, but he's definitely not someone that a low god can deal with. I was even more astonished now. If Donades was truly here for me, why would he only send an incarnation? Was he looking down on me? Why did he come here when he should have been fighting to the death on the bloody battlefield? I was unable to understand. Donades hadn't suffered any losses in the Battle of the Hades. He had fought against Bastion for several years before leaving. It was obvious that he hadn't been serious. It could be said that Cynthia had died in front of all these Chaos main gods. Although Donades was fighting against Bastion, he hadn't gone all out. It was evident that this so-called number 1 Chaos War god definitely wasn't as loyal as the rumors said. He's not the only one. Following Harloise's words, another scene appeared in front of me. Near the city gate, a deformed devil was casually tearing an inferno demon into two, cruelly enjoying the golden blood that flowed from the flames. The bystanders in the background didn't dare to approach because they were afraid of Donati's demonic might. Sailor? I nodded as I felt that this is the right style. By the way, I was already so unlucky and used to being hunted down. Once I felt that I was safe, I would immediately feel that something was wrong. Could this illness even be cured? The image in front of him changed again. This time it was a familiar face. What is that? The red parrot, Ariel? It's red, ye vulture Ivla. Others have fallen because of you. At least remember their names. On the screen was a young fallen angel. Her beautiful face was filled with seriousness, and her black wings seemed to be burning with negative energy. Her grayish-black crystal armor was obviously expensive, and the giant flaming blade on her back was at least a legendary item that was not for sale. 7 years had passed, and the Saintess Knight, who was still a little naive when it came to faith, had now become a seasoned veteran. She was followed by a few adventurers who seemed to have some experience. Judging by appearance alone, this fallen angel was far more powerful than the Chaos War God and the Blood War General. Why is she here? I was rather astonished. Back in the day, she should have finished all her correspondence courses in the Northland's Holy Light and Law Academies. She was just like an ordinary Chinibu girl who finally discovered that her past was nothing but a dark history. She embarked on a journey to find herself. I meant a journey to find her true faith. Why did she end up in the Chaos Abyss? Her companions were also of many different species. There were tiefling warriors, elven mages, a purgatory centaur archer, and a dwarf priest. Judging from the shining golden holy emblem, this was probably Mary's high-level priest. This was a standard 5-person team, a common team for adventurers. There were melee and ranged attackers. This team had 5 job classes, and there was also a priest who could heal. It was quite balanced. Don't you think that centaur looks quite familiar as well? Don't centaurs all look like that? Cassio. When I took a closer look, I finally understood why Cassio's face was so familiar. If I removed his purgatory traits and the beard that covered half his face, wouldn't that be the handsome golden centaur Prince Cassio? Compared to back in the day, Cassio no longer had his exquisite golden half-body armor, nor did he have his eye-catching enchanted bone bow. His simple black chain mail seemed rather plain, and his wooden bow had no decorations or patterns, making him seem even more unsightly. However, Cassio's gaze, which seemed to have been numbed by the passage of time, would give me a strange sense of sharpness if I looked at him for too long. It was as if I was being stared at by a hunting eagle. If I recall correctly, didn't he leave a message and run away? Yep, that message left a deep impression on me. It was one of the top 10 news stories back in the day. I treated him as my brother, my most trustworthy brother. He actually wanted to bed me. I was rendered speechless when I recalled that scandal that caused so much chaos. From a certain standpoint, scaring away his good brother and loyal follower Cassio was one of the main reasons why Beifong lost his position as the leader of his mercenary group. Back in the day, I must have been insane to have chosen that bastard as the leader of my mercenary group. At the time, I thought that Cassio had returned to the underground world. I even racked my brains to think of an excuse to explain to the old Beastman tribe leader that I was the one who had brought Cassio out of the Chaos Abyss. Yet, the end result was like this. But later on, I heard that Cassio hadn't returned to the underground world or the Beastmen plains. He had left a message saying that he was continuing his adventuring. In just a short 10 years, half of his body had already turned purgatory. It would seem that either he had some miraculous encounter, or he had been living in the Chaos Abyss all this time and had voluntarily accepted his demonization. This was a 5-member adventurer team, and there were actually 2 familiar faces among them. I was now rather interested. Do you want to greet them? My instincts tell me that they themselves are trouble, great trouble. Even if we just casually come into contact with them, there won't be any room for buffer. You don't care about them? It seems that they're basically fleeing from a disaster. How heartless. Indeed, their expressions were fatigued. Their armor was covered in dust and mud, and their weapons were blood-stained. It was obvious that they hadn't recovered from the battle yet. Forget about the others. Adult elves had racial advantages, which meant that they wouldn't even need to sleep for an entire week. But now, all the elves in this adventurer team were obviously fatigued, which meant that something was off. Let's send one of our clones over to listen first. After reaching the myth rank, Harlow's ability to transform her clones had improved even further. Now, her clones could transform, change colors, and conceal themselves as she pleased. She was definitely the best information collector. On the way here, we had already sent out several hundred slime clones. Plus, our clones kept increasing in size. After one more night, nothing in this region would be able to hide from us. However, we had only sent out a few slime clones to follow existences like Donati's and Sailor from afar. Their senses and instincts were far too sharp, and it was possible that they would be discovered if they looked at them too closely. However, Ivla and Cassio didn't have such an ability. A transparent slime bat landed right in front of them and shattered into muddy pieces, which Ivla and Cassio stepped on. Slime bats were the best eavesdroppers. Together with a long-range observer, nothing would be able to hide from us. I wasn't in a rush at all. I simply walked directly to a newspaper stand that had a familiar fairy symbol. Those fairies had already done business in the Chaos Abyss several hundred years ago. I could pretty much guess what the recent headlines would be. I had killed Losnina. The death of a devil lord would definitely be the most important news in the near future. The fairies' news spread even faster than the Thieves' Guild's information. It would actually be the easiest to find major news that couldn't be hidden. I tossed out my gold coin and received a newspaper from the Black Fairies. The ink on the newspaper hadn't even dried yet. I flipped through it twice and discovered that it was indeed on the front page. However, it seemed that someone else had stolen the headlines. Shock. The devils have suffered yet another heavy blow. 2 devil lords have been killed in a single night. Why did the Abyss Prince attack? Cavendish? He's out as well? Chapter 594. Elite adventurers who were related to the Northlands factions, an incarnation of a Chaos main god, a Holy Knight squadron that suddenly appeared, and they were even prepared to sacrifice themselves. Perhaps it was a coincidence that a single factor had appeared in this city, but it would be far too naive to think that it was a coincidence when all the information was gathered together. But if I needed information, which organization in the world could compare to the fairies in front of me? I had a deep-rooted alliance with them. This is my Diamond VIP card. I need the latest local information. Yep, not only about this mortal plane, but also the most recent important news in the Chaos Abyss. The fairies in front of me hurriedly led me into the shop when they saw my VIP card. Inside, fairies wearing small dresses and red necklaces were running around. They looked no different from their brethren in the mortal plane. The manager who received me ran off with my card. Several minutes later, he returned with a serious expression. Apologies, your unlimited information service has expired. Your Diamond VIP card has also been cancelled. You're now only a Gold Level 1 user. I paused in surprise, but Harlois chuckled. What a solid alliance. How does it feel to be burned after you've outlived your usefulness? As expected of the gnome's distant relatives, nonsense. They're already burning the bridge before we've even crossed it. The fairies had already established an alliance with me for a long time, probably around the time that I returned to the Northlands. They gave me this VIP card which represented the unlimited information service. Although I didn't really trust these information organizations that delivered themselves to my doorstep, it would be a waste not to use this free information. Time proved that their information was far more accurate and spread far faster than any other information organization. Naturally, we established a long-term alliance. Although you're no longer our Diamond member, we can still provide you any information below SSS rank. We'll even give you a 30% discount compared to other users. Alright, it was quite clear now that Harlow's free trial period had ended. If you wanted to continue using our services, you'd have to pay more. Looking at this dark-skinned little fellow, I felt that he was related to the gnomes by blood. He was also good at tricking people. When you didn't need him, you would see his advertisements everywhere, offering all kinds of free benefits. But when you needed him, he would suddenly raise the price. Your Highness, please don't think that we are targeting you. Your gold 3 stars is still the highest level of service. It's just that the headquarters cleaned up all the diamond clients some time ago. Now there are no diamond clients who can get free services. A while ago? How long ago? 5 years ago. Well, looks like I'm not the only one whose promotion has expired. Everyone's promotional trial period has ended, and now everyone has to pay. Judging from the timeline, it was probably after the Hades had completely stabilized. It was also probably after the Holy War had been averted that the fairies were destined to be wiped out. Thinking about it this way, the fairies felt like they were burning the bridge after crossing it. Can I use spirit coins? Sure, this is the hard currency of the lower planes. We accept it. Still, even if the fairies charged me a fee, I didn't really care. After all, I felt disgusted by the fact that the fairies scammed the dwarves for their soul coins. Now that I heard that they were starting to charge me a fee, I secretly decided to visit them more often in the future. After all, for me, free services would only make me feel even more uneasy. This wasn't because I had some strange fetish. It was just that the world was so difficult. Apart from bait and traps, there didn't seem to be anything free. It was inevitable that people would overthink things. Even if the fairies truly wanted to help me, the favor they owed me would be even more difficult to repay than money. It would be quite troublesome if the fairies wanted me to pay them back in the future. If the fairies had another motive or standpoint, even if my previous information was always accurate, it was possible that the most important information I received this time would be wrong. I would always be on guard against these fairies whose backgrounds I didn't know. It would always be better to have one's own information organization. Relying on others would only cause major problems sooner or later. Most of the time, I only used the fairies' information to verify my own information sources. But now that I was in the Chaos Abyss, I obviously couldn't count on the Northlands or the Church of Law's information organizations. I could only rely on the fairies that were everywhere. I tossed out some soul coins as I watched the surveillance and sipped some tea. The fairies were as outstanding as ever. In less than half an hour, my desk was filled with important information from all over the Chaos Abyss. Harlow's incarnation had also arrived at the Dragontail Tavern. She told me that Adam and the others had already arrived. This was already quite a pleasant surprise for me, but she mysteriously told me that there was another surprise waiting for me. Based on my many years of understanding of Harlow's, this surprise would likely be something that could scare someone to death. Considering how my luck had been becoming scarier and scarier lately, I had Harlow's think of a way to contact the more reliable Marguerite. I also decided to buy an escape route from the fairies. The fairies were quite generous to those who were willing to pay in gold. However, the very first piece of information gave me a huge blow to my head. A certain Draken ranked 10th on the Calamity rankings committed another crime in the mortal plane and angered everyone. Several dozen gods and semi-gods are hunting him down, and he's now vanished without a trace. Yep, a certain Draken ranked 10th on the Calamity rankings? I would be an idiot if I didn't know who he was. Another piece of information told me that he had recently appeared in the Chaos Abyss. What did he do that caused the gods to group up together to hunt him down? Forget it, don't tell me. I don't want to know at all. I lay down on a soft sofa and calculated the odds of me, coincidentally meeting that Draken. Considering the size of the Chaos Abyss, this should have been an astronomical number, but when considering my luck stat, I decided to buy another escape route. It would be far too embarrassing to die because of someone else's involvement. Harlois and I split up to read through all the information in front of us. Obviously, useful information wouldn't be so easily discovered. I only memorized all of it for now. Perhaps I would be able to use it in the future. Many rumors that seemed like nothing more than gossip could possibly reveal important information. As expected, I didn't have any information on Cavendish that I cared about the most. It only said that he suddenly appeared and killed off that unfortunate Devil Lord. This was no different from the simple news report. For main god-level existences, even the fairies who were everywhere would find it difficult to gather useful information. However, apart from buying information, I also had some other trivial matters that I needed the fairies' help with. 2 letters. One for the Church of Law and one for the Southern sect. Since I had promised the snake god and received a reward, it was only natural for me to be loyal to him. This was also fulfilling my promise. Originally, I had better channels to communicate with the gods of the Hades faction. But when I thought about how that annoying undead emperor was still forcefully occupying my personal world, and considering that she was a main god, I could only endure it for now. Once we have enough powerful teammates, we can start the Undead Emperor dungeon. The second thing I needed to do was to use the fairies' organization to gather all sorts of myth-ranked materials and related information. Although I didn't have high hopes, it was possible that I would be able to obtain some if I offered a large reward. Concepts related to the concentration and dispersion of light, concepts related to pure negative emotions such as pain and despair, and top-level ice-type materials. It would seem that you're about to enter the myth rank. Your Highness Roland, forgive me for being direct, but apart from the last ice-type material, it'll be quite difficult to find any other ice-type materials. And if it's ice-type materials that we can find, they might not be as good as yours. I'll do my best. I nodded. This was within my expectations as well. If spending money could solve all problems, there wouldn't be so many unlucky individuals who would be stuck at the myth rank for their entire lives. Any precious material that could be used as the core of a myth-ranked weapon would be something that all myth, saint, and even semi-gods would desire. If they were lucky enough to obtain such a material, they wouldn't casually use it to strengthen their opponents, even if they didn't use it themselves. Powerful existences at this level would rarely lack money. Exchanging for their own necessities was the most common choice. But when considering the scarcity of materials and the mistrust between both sides, even if both sides were willing to trade, the final success rate would be incredibly low. Right, help me look for information on this adventuring team as well. Cassio's adventuring team was shown in my memory sphere. Since the adventuring team members were quite strong, they should be quite famous. But this time, the fairies named Didi fell silent. Do you need more money? No, just the information about this adventuring team appearing in this city is enough for us to ask for more money from you. But this time, they've truly caused major trouble, major trouble. We don't want to get involved at all. As long as you're willing to deal with this trouble, I'll give you all the information for free. Please don't tell me. I suddenly don't want to know anything at all. Chapter 595. In the snowy forest area of the 7th level of the Chaos Abyss, demons and devils engaged in a major battle. Both the Demon Lord of Tyranny and Demon Lord Sophocles the Deceiver participated in the battle. The devils won, and Sophocles the Deceiver was seriously injured. However, the devils retreated overnight and gave up all of their territory. Out of all the reports, this was probably the one that attracted the most attention. Both sides had sent out main gods, so this was clearly an important battlefield that they were determined to win. The demons would gain territory if they lost, while the devils would shrink their territory if they won. This seemed inconceivable, but it was very common in battles between demons and devils. The number of demons was almost limitless, and the defeat of a great lord would only make the other lords eager to try, and the civil war between them would never end. The power of the demons in the Pyramid Society was limited. Perhaps they could rely on their militarization and strict organization to achieve tactical victories, but if they fought a long war of attrition, they would find that the demons only lost some cannon fodder, while they lost their elite. Battles in the Chaos Abyss were quite common. There would be several such battles every month. Even if a main god appeared, that would only increase the price of information by a few levels. However, I could tell that something was off. The 7th floor? If I remember correctly, it's an ice territory. It seems to be the territory of a demon elemental lord. Strange, haven't the first few layers of the abyss been overexploited? Why are they still fighting over it? The first few levels of the Chaos Abyss had already been managed by the local demon lords for countless years. Even if there were any treasures or minerals here, they should have all been used up. Perhaps demon populations could also be counted as resources, but they weren't very valuable. There would definitely be a reason for war. Although a war in the Chaos Abyss didn't require much support, since even a main god like Sophocles the Deceiver was involved, there would definitely be great benefits to be gained. That was why Sophocles the Deceiver was willing to sacrifice his own army. Kill the demons while they're weak? Sophocles the Deceiver definitely wouldn't do such a thing to any other demon lord. However, this definitely wasn't Sophocles the Deceiver's style. Sophocles would definitely have his own reasons for forcefully opposing a devil lord. Thinking up to this point, I couldn't help but laugh. Wasn't there a person in front of me who knew everything? What was the point of guessing? Thus, I straightforwardly asked my question. I heard that there's a gate in the 7th level that leads to the main plane, and it's a natural gate. Was this really a surprise? At this moment, I felt more and more like I had entered the eternal holy war. During the holy war, the rising elemental tide would allow powerful individuals to rapidly grow. Countless dimensional doors would also bring visitors from other dimensions. Some dimensional doors were naturally created due to the rising elemental tide. Some dimensional doors might be left behind from past holy wars, or special areas with unstable space. However, even more dimensional doors were artificially created by dimensional bigshots who paid a tremendous price. It didn't seem like much of a difference, but no matter if it was in terms of how harmful or harmful it would be to the residents of the mortal plane, it was completely different. Demon invasions were probably the most frequent dimensional calamity in the mortal plane. There would be a major demon invasion every few hundred years, and a minor demon invasion every few years. However, if one investigated the root of the demon invasion, it would be either some powerful individual plotting behind the scenes to harvest souls and flesh, or some crazy mortal plane resident committing a heinous crime. However, these dimensional doors to the Chaos Abyss were all artificially created. Naturally, there would be a limit. The mortal plane would have to pay a sufficient amount of sacrifices and souls to create one, while the Chaos Abyss would also have to pay a tremendous price. There was also a limit to the amount of military strength that could be sent in. And even if the demons successfully entered the mortal plane, apart from having to deal with the pursuit of the order gods and mortals, they would constantly have to fight against the mortal plane's natural laws. Not only would they be greatly weakened, but they would also have to constantly pay a price in order to obtain temporary residence in the mortal plane. It would only be a matter of time before they returned to the Chaos Abyss. In that case, such a calamity would have a limit. Cavendish's example of destroying several countries with only a few demon armies was only a special case. However, if it was during the Holy War, then the natural dimensional doors would open as the elemental tide increased. That would be even more interesting. Both sides would be able to freely enter and exit as they pleased. There would be no limit to how many people could enter and how long they could stay in the mortal plane. Normally speaking, this would be the new main battlefield of the Holy War. During the Holy War, with the high elemental tide as the prerequisite, It was possible to transform artificial dimensional doors into permanent natural dimensional doors as long as a sufficient price was paid. However, perhaps due to the dimensional will's influence, the success rate would usually be quite low. All sorts of natural and man-made disasters would often cause these plans to fail. Several months ago, if we hadn't appeared in the Solid Dukedom, it was likely that the Halettum generation's ruins would have transformed into either a dimensional door to the Death Plane or a dimensional door to the Chaos Abyss. However, the fact that we had appeared here could also be viewed as a type of dimensional resistance that was being guided by fate. However, if it was a naturally formed dimensional door, then there would be no way around it. It wouldn't take much time for it to expand to its maximum size. There would be no warning signs or restrictions, and any place it appeared would naturally become a battlefield. Furthermore, it would be a bottomless pit that was basically impossible to seal off during the Holy War. Why was it impossible to seal off? Whenever a demon lord finished off all of its resources, a second demon lord would naturally follow. The first demon lord would reap all of the souls and flesh he had harvested. Not only would he receive the favor of the Chaos Abyss and successfully level up, he would also return with his demon army that had been resting for 2 years. According to historical records, the Holy War had reached a stalemate. In just one night, the demon army had changed its flag. It turned out that a demon lord had successfully ambushed the dimensional door and killed off the demon lord on this side. The new demon army's combat strength was several times that of the original demon army, and the Order faction's defending demon army was completely defeated. Although the will of the Chaos Abyss would do her best to reduce conflicts between demon lords during the Holy War, she would naturally pretend not to see any internal conflicts that would be beneficial to the overall battle situation. Unlike other battles where the vanguard would be used as cannon fodder, it would be quite difficult for the mortal plane's residents to defend against the Chaos Abyss's first wave of invaders. The Chaos Abyss wouldn't normally put up much resistance, and the Chaos Abyss would even be able to obtain a tremendous amount of souls and flesh from the mortal plane's residents. With such a premise, it was completely understandable that the demons and devils would fight over the Chaos Abyss. In that case, it was quite normal that the petty Sophocles didn't come looking for me after I entered the Chaos Abyss. He had no time at all. But even if I knew this information, what could I possibly do? Go chase away the demon army and close the dimensional door? Not to mention how to close the dimensional door that was basically a natural phenomenon, it would be as difficult as manually closing a black hole. There would be no end to the demon army. If I killed one demon lord, 10 more would arrive. If I destroyed an army, 10 more would arrive. If I destroyed an army, more than 10 dimensional armies would arrive. This was probably the first dimensional door that would appear during the Holy War. With a main god controlling the dimensional door, the demon's internal conflicts would likely be far crueler than the Holy War itself. Numerous gods would appear on the battlefield, and even main god-level existences would directly clash with each other. Even the current me wasn't confident that I would be able to survive passing through such a battlefield. In fact, it was highly likely that Cavendish's interference had something to do with this. At the very least, he had cut off the devil main god's wings, causing the devils to finally give up on the dimensional door. With so much information, it would seem that the first mega battlefield of the Holy War was about to be born. All I could do was try to find out which country or region the other side was from and give them a warning so that they could be on guard. But even that probably wouldn't be that easy. Where is the other side? Do you have any information? The fairy firmly shook her head. The dimensional door will always be protected by a super powerful existence. It's impossible for our people to get close. This was to be expected, but it was rather depressing. However, I thought of another possibility. Astria, is there any record of it in the game's history? Where's the first Chaos Abyss battlefield in history? Usually, it's just my system or hey. Why are you calling me by my name now? I'll tell you quite responsibly, don't count on it. The creation of the Hades has completely messed up the elemental tide. The original Chaos Abyss battlefield's location can no longer be used as a reference. This is all your fault. Alright then, I couldn't count on my cheating device anymore. My ability to predict the future was now half useless. I was the one who asked for this. However, I didn't regret creating the Hades at all. That was because the Hades creation had helped us escape from a hopeless situation where no matter how hard we tried, it would be impossible for us to survive. At this moment, Harlois suddenly jumped onto my shoulder. What's the matter? Did you find anything in your information? Nothing. There's so much messy information. It'll take quite some time to sort it all out. It's just that we've contacted Marguerite and the others. They're ready and want to know who you're going to attack. I had already sent information about Sailor and Donates to Adam and the others. No matter why Sailor and Donates had come, they definitely wouldn't be friends that I could sit down and drink tea with. I naturally wouldn't waste a chance to launch a pincer attack on Sailor and Donates. However, there would only be one chance to launch a pincer attack on Sailor and Donates. Not only would it be impossible for us to launch a second pincer attack on Sailor and Donates, but we would also need to be on guard against Sailor's reinforcements. I needed to make a decision as soon as possible. If I delayed too long, Sailor and Donates would meet sooner or later. If something unexpected happened, we might not be able to take them down with our current strength. In terms of long-term benefits, it would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to weaken Donates, the Chaos War God. The stronger this incarnation was, the more Donates' losses would be. Donates had already suffered significant losses not long after the Battle of the Hades. If he could rest for 2 years so that he wouldn't be able to serve as a vanguard in the Holy War, this would be far more valuable than killing a Blood War general. However, Donates hadn't expressed any hostility, while Sailor was hunting us down. I was rather hesitant. I wanted to kill both of them, but I didn't have enough power to do so. I glanced at the fairies, but before I even said anything, I shook my head and gave up. Indeed, the fairies had some power. However, they had never interfered with other species' affairs for the past several millennia. It was impossible for them to give up their status as neutral business partners for the sake of me. Heloise's surprise interrupted my thoughts, and my question was answered with a voice conversation. Will there really be reinforcements here? We're in the Chaos Abyss, and there are demons everywhere. Even though we have such an important item with us. This was Cassio's voice. It was much stronger than before, but it sounded full of anxiety. This is my Lord's guidance. His divine prophecy indicates that reinforcements are in this city. As long as we wait patiently, they'll come find us. This was an unfamiliar voice, but it was obvious that it belonged to the priest in our team. A prophecy? Since when did the goddess of wealth have such a divine ability? His tone was filled with disrespect for the gods. Compared to the holy knight who had always called himself my lord, the fallen angels had changed the most after their faith was shattered. However, I wanted to cry. It seemed that I had been scammed yet again. Perhaps I would even have to work as a volunteer. Damned Mary. The one who had guided them here to find reinforcements was the goddess of wealth of the Hades. The reinforcements they were looking for were order reinforcements in the Chaos Abyss. Apart from us, who else could there be? If Donates wasn't looking for me, then he was looking for them. And if we met, just the fact that Cassio was in this team made it impossible for me to watch them die. It would be impossible to avoid attacking them. But even if I couldn't watch them die, I wouldn't do volunteer work for free. Let's just treat it as them using their bodies to repay the favor of saving us. Don't misunderstand, I'm saying that they'll be hired as fighters. Notify Adam and the others to revise our plan. We have new helpers, so we'll split into 2 groups and attack from both sides. You and Adam and the others will go meet up with Donates. I'll go talk to Sailor with those brats about what happened during the sandstorm. Chapter 596. Blood War General Sailor was a famous major individual in many dimensions. At the very least, 7 years ago, he would definitely have been a powerful Chaos main boss. Sailor wasn't a Devil Lord, but his reputation in the Chaos Abyss surpassed even the few Devil Lords who were more knowledgeable. He had participated in 2 eternal holy wars and guarded the front lines. The names of the powerful individuals who died by his hands were probably even thicker than a phone book. However, with the overall decline of the devil species, the fragile balance was broken. Sailor went from a Blood War general to a fugitive in a single night. It could be said that he suffered a tremendous fall. Sailor had always been treated as a mindless killing machine by his own kind. When he heard the news, he went berserk on the Blood War battlefield and tore apart several inferno demons in front of his subordinates to vent his anger. Then, he was exiled from the Chaos Abyss for murdering his own kind. Such a crime was obviously unreliable, but only Sailor knew that he had lost his status as the Blood War Fortress's city lord because of his own volition. This war is completely different from the previous ones. The Chaos Abyss Lord has lost his consciousness, and all the Chaos Lords are no longer restricted. It's only a matter of time before the demons and devils completely clash. Although it's quite inconceivable, the Chaos Abyss is indeed establishing a new order. The Chaos Lords are actually being unified by Sailor. But now that the unification is over, as a devil, Sailor occupied such an important position. If he goes down now, he'll be able to escape unscathed, but it'll be too late. Indeed, even though Sailor had a frighteningly abnormal appearance and spoke in a crude and illogical manner, often venting his anger, and was a classic example of someone who didn't use their brains, he had lived for so long and occupied such an important position as the Blood War General. How could he possibly be an idiot who didn't use his brain? When everyone believed that Sailor was a demon in a devil's skin, either the Chaos Abyss was wrong, or Sailor's image was completely fake. The will of the Chaos Abyss would never be wrong. Sailor had tricked everyone. Is it impossible for someone who is ugly to like beautiful art? Is it impossible for someone born with a deformity to have a twisted mind? Is it impossible for someone to have muscles but no brains? Very few people knew that Sailor was not only skilled in strategy and tactics, but he was also highly accomplished in art. He was a top-level artist in both sculpture and music, and he even had his own understanding of finance and politics. His deep understanding of the essence of things gave him a special understanding and control over quality and existence. He, the ugly devil Sailor who was born with a natural abnormality, was the existence that the Lord of Tyranny, Sarwinston, truly trusted. He was also Sarwinston's direct descendant. In fact, even Losnina, who was the mastermind of this mission, only knew the reason on the surface. Only Sarwinston, who was Sarwinston's only relative, knew the true goal and reason. Even though he had lost 2 Devil Lords in a row in less than half a month, he still had no intention of giving up. He still had an ace up his sleeve. As long as he could find that person and successfully launch a surprise attack, he would definitely be able to. "Hey, Sailor, what are you thinking about? How do you enter a trance? How do you want to capture Roland?" Sailor instinctively responded to that familiar voice and affectionate greeting, as if an old neighbor was meeting again. The next moment, he recalled the owner of that voice, and his jaw dropped as he looked in that direction in disbelief. "Roland, why are you here?" Sitting at a table in a small shop on the street, the man holding a coffee and a newspaper in the background, the man who seemed to be on a vacation, was Roland, whom she had just fought not long ago. I frowned when I heard Sailor's words. He wasn't here to find me? He wasn't here to follow me into the city. Boom. But the next moment, I didn't have the time to think about anyone else. The gigantic devil suddenly expanded in size, and his sawtooth battle axe viciously sank into the ground, transforming the entire roadside restaurant into a deep crater. Sailor waved his dwarf-like arms, causing countless pieces of dirt to fly into the sky in defiance of gravity. It was as if a giant had excavated the entire battlefield, leaving a huge hole in the ground. Sailor was a pure killing machine on the battlefield. Common villains would die from talking too much, but this wouldn't happen to a true soldier, a devil general. Sailor's unique ability to control mass had long since spread throughout the entire universe. Any target that was hit by his attack would be blasted apart from inside out. Nobody would be foolish enough to face him head-on. But today he saw something that he couldn't believe. His battle axe, which nobody had ever dared to face head-on, was blocked by a thin ice shield. Sailor had just been defenseless, but now he was covered in a translucent armor of ice. Before Sailor could recover from his astonishment, several dozen ice blades appeared in the sky. They spun for a short while before slashing directly at him. 1, 2, 3. The sharp blades of ice continued to bombard him. I took a deep breath. It would seem that Sailor's custom-made trump card was truly effective. Unlike certain hot-blooded cockroaches who would always shout ridiculous slogans in order to infinitely increase their combat strength, I had always believed that victory or defeat in battle often depended on prior preparations. This was also how mages usually worked. Just like when I fought Losnina, the first time I fought her would be to gather information. The second time I fought her would naturally greatly increase my chances of victory. And since I knew that Sailor was highly likely to become my enemy, I naturally made preparations when considering his abnormally dangerous abilities. I never expected that there would be a day when I would need to use my Frigid Flame's ice armor. Sailor's ability was quite famous for being quite unreasonable. It was the ability to forcefully modify the physical quality of the target he came into contact with. This was obviously a concept attack that had already reached the level of the laws of physics. Sailor's reputation of being undefeatable in melee combat came about because he was able to render his enemies' physical and magical defenses useless, allowing them to be sliced apart by his own boiling flesh and blood. Indeed, I was unable to understand how Sailor's ability, which was basically a game modifier, was able to do such a thing. I also didn't know where Sailor had obtained such a powerful special ability. However, I was able to follow the principles of his ability and defend against it. I assumed that Sailor was able to change an object's physical constants and state of existence. However, he would at the very least need to understand the physical constants of an object's existence, such as iron, steel, or ice. Only then would he be able to use his ability to change the physical properties of the object and modify it. If what Sailor touched wasn't a product of H's world at all, but instead the theoretically coldest ice that violated the laws of physics, would he be able to modify it? That's probably impossible. Sailor's ability is basically the equivalent of a game modifier. He's able to find a world's, or game's, lowest level database and modify one game's data. That doesn't mean that he has the authority to modify other games, or worlds' data. Even if he's really able to do so, he'll need sufficient time and experimentation to adjust his own ability. The reality before me proved that my theory was correct. The Frigid Flame's ice armor that I had left in my dimensional storage bag had indeed blocked Sailor's attack on my physical body. Of course, I could only grit my teeth and accept the side effects of using this ice armor. It was still quite worth it to be able to trade Frostbite for a Chaos main boss. That ice sword storm that resembled floating cannons seemed quite ferocious. However, it was actually just ice that Sailor was unable to control. Considering how the residents of the lower planes usually had thick skin and flesh, I didn't even have any hopes of killing Sailor. Right after that, Sailor stood up and scathed. As expected, his power wasn't just that abnormal special ability of his. However, although Sailor wasn't injured, he had a panicked expression. It seemed that this was the first time that he had met an opponent who didn't fear his ability at all. How did you do it? Take a guess. Of course, I wouldn't be so foolish as to explain my own ability to my opponent. Icy flames gathered on my ice sword and ice armor. Since Sailor was destined to suffer frostbite, there was no need to hold back my double-edged sword's freezing flames. The pale white flames covered my ice armor, causing Sailor to instinctively retreat. His devil's combat instincts told him that he would have no future if he came into contact with those icy flames. As expected of that person's brother, it would seem that the rumors were true. The deformed devil general didn't immediately explode with rage like he usually did. Instead, he took a deep look at me as if he wanted to memorize my appearance. Then, he turned around and ran. That's right, the devil general who had fought bloody battles, the undefeatable devil commander, unhesitatingly ran away. The price for his powerful special ability was that he didn't have any long-range attack abilities. Since he met an opponent who countered him in such a way, wouldn't he just wait for death if he didn't run? As a general who fought on the front lines for a long time, a warrior's honor was nothing more than a joke to begin with. If he met a strong opponent that he couldn't defeat, not only would he run, he would even jump into a pile of corpses and play dead. However, I laughed and shouted out the secret signal that we had agreed on earlier. MT, main tank, you have enough resistances and your equipment can handle it. This time, focus on taking down the boss. Deal damage in the last 3 seconds. Those who slack off be more serious. Those who deal the lowest damage won't get any money. The next instant, a female fallen angel knight appeared in Sailor's path of escape. She held an ice shield in her hand, and her ice armor seemed so familiar to Sailor. Then, a centaur covered in ice armor jumped out from a nearby rooftop. This centaur was actually using an ice bow and an ice sword. A priest wearing ice armor jumped out from a corner of the rooftop. The devil general glared at me with hatred. He felt like he had just walked into a death trap that was specifically designed for him. Would you believe me if I told you that this was a coincidence? Isn't it normal to always have a few backup ice armor pieces? You're still looking at me? If you keep looking at me, I'll drink you to death. Casually speaking was completely different from giving guidance to other adventurers. Now wasn't the time to relax. A devil boss would be able to drag others down with him at the very last moment. Don't get close to him. Even if he's wearing ice armor, he can easily tear you apart. He doesn't have any long-range attack abilities. Let's slowly kite him to death with ice arrows and ice spears. Suddenly, Harlois heard Adam's angry roar. They should have started attacking at the same time. Even so, they only fought for a short 2 minutes. This is troublesome. Hurry up and retreat. Tactical change. Start running. Chapter 597. Adam and the others lost? I paused in surprise. Splitting up into 2 groups and ambushing both sides wasn't because I was intentionally being arrogant. It was a decision I had made after careful planning. The Chaos War God's incarnation had been a 4-person team consisting of Adam, Marguerite, Little Red, and Harlois. Every single one of them had actual combat strength above that of an ordinary human semigod. They were all veterans with several hundred years of combat experience. It should have been quite easy for them to deal with a god's incarnation. In fact, our side's combat strength was actually rather lacking. I was the only one leading the little rascals to fight against a world boss. If my ice shield and ice armor were unable to defend against Sailor's special ability, then we would call it a tactical retreat, which was actually a method of fleeing in order to stall for as much time as possible. It had to be said that the possibility of this happening was quite high. Absolute ice was highly resistant to special abilities. However, its material was no different from ordinary ice. With Sailor's brute strength, he could easily shatter a pebble by tossing it at Sailor. Sailor hadn't done this before, probably not because he hadn't thought of it, but rather because he couldn't do it. This bug-like ability will definitely have its limit. Why don't we just toss out a pebble and set the pebble's mass to be infinite or super large? That way, whoever we toss at will die. Not only that, he can use his ability to control mass and gravity to fly an entire mountain range. Then, he can cancel his ability and crush anyone he touches. Could it be that Buddha Tathagata is the complete version of Sailor? Sailor was just as I had guessed. In fact, he was even easier to deal with than I had expected. Sailor's weapons couldn't leave his body. He couldn't even kick away pebbles. Any object that came into contact with his skin or weapon would naturally stick to him. And this stickiness was something that Sailor himself was unable to dispel. Perhaps his true ability isn't as powerful as I expected. It's not that he's able to change the object's mass. It's that he's temporarily fused with that object, just like how alcohol is mixed into water. When the two fused into one, he added his own special ability. That's why he can only use his ability on objects that are connected to his skin. He can't change that object's location, just like how nobody can pull themselves up by their hair. If Sailor was able to break free from this restriction, he would probably be at the level of a Devil Lord at the very least. The advantage of being a veteran powerful individual was that they had stable combat experience. However, they lacked explosive power. Sailor's special ability had been seen through. Plus, Sailor's special abilities had been set up to deal with this. A bunch of ants dares to challenge me. Unfortunately, no matter how furious he was unable to escape the encirclement. The adventurer team that surrounded him was always at the edge of his alert range. However, the killing weapons that suddenly flew over, the cold ice spears and ice arrows, became more and more deadly. Every time Sailor tried to forcefully break through, that fallen angel would always appear next to him. That huge, scorching sword that burned with gray flames was not easy to defend against. As for the purgatory centaur that was constantly jumping around on the roof, it was even more dangerous. Its dim yellow eyes seemed to have double pupils. It was clearly in a blind spot behind the wall, but its ice arrow was able to turn and shoot towards it. It was obviously a godly archer. Every second, Sailor would have to spend a large amount of energy on defending against the purgatory centaur's arrows. Sailor wished that he could use his eyes 4 times at the same time, making him even more mentally and physically exhausted. However, in Sailor's mind, the most dangerous individual of all was still Roland. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. Roland's past achievements in battle had made his name known to the lower planes of the Chaos Abyss. However, none of Roland's many glorious titles and past achievements could compare to Roland's natural status. Roland was the older brother of the Chaos Abyss Prince Cavendish, an existence that had once been on equal footing with Cavendish. Cavendish L had given the Chaos Abyss so many headaches. Naturally, Roland's older brother, Roland L, would receive the same level of attention. Sailor had already suffered at Roland's hands. Even though he saw that Roland seemed to be slacking off, he still didn't dare to relax his vigilance at all. If he spent 30% of his energy on defending against the archers, he would spend at least 40% of his energy on defending against Roland. However, the more nervous he was, the more tired and anxious he became. Sailor knew that being anxious would only bring more trouble. However, he still didn't dare to relax his vigilance at all. He became even more nervous. Wolf pack tactics. Vicious wolves would usually move out in packs. However, they would rarely use their advantage in numbers to directly suppress their prey. After they trapped their prey, they would often circle around their prey in order to avoid any losses. They would constantly harass their prey, causing their prey to lose focus and stamina due to being on guard for a long time. Finally, the moment their prey relaxed, their harass attacks would transform into a fatal attack. The exhausted prey would be freed, and the vicious wolf behind them would bite off their necks. The wolf pack tactic of surrounding and not attacking wasn't a rare or difficult tactic. Bandits and corpse eaters in the mortal plane were just as skilled at using this tactic. However, this was the most suitable tactic for battle at a time like this. This tactic made things quite difficult for Sailor. He was unable to run away even if he wanted to, nor was he able to catch up if he wanted to. Sailor's wounds kept accumulating, but he didn't even have the chance to exchange wounds for wounds. Should he kill the alpha wolf to deal with the encirclement? The alpha wolf was far stronger than the little wolf. Not only that, the alpha wolf was hiding in a safe location to threaten Sailor. For Sailor, just being able to escape from the alpha wolf's threat was already an extravagant hope. Sailor's heart was burning with anxiety. He knew that Roland had already discovered all of his weaknesses. If he was stalled here without reinforcements, it was likely that he would be exhausted to death. Sooner or later, he would bleed his last drop of blood dry on this land. On the other hand, even though I clearly had the advantage, I was unable to feel happy about it. It would seem that we won't be able to take down Sailor either. Even though my current plan was effective, I was just as anxious as Sailor. I had chosen to kite Sailor's group because I had considered that Adam's group would have a higher chance of victory. As long as I could stall Sailor until reinforcements arrived, their chances of victory would naturally be even higher. But Adam's group is actually at a disadvantage. How much longer can Cassio's group last? Even though Harlow's incarnation told me about the dangerous situation on the battlefield, I wasn't in a hurry to save Cassio's group. I was still 2 blocks away. By the time I arrived, it would likely be too late. And the moment I left, not a single one of Cassio's group would survive. Our new companions weren't in a good situation. Apart from the fact that they were far weaker than Sailor, their ice armor that seemed mighty and domineering was actually constantly draining the user's stamina. The ice armor's temperature was low for an extended period of time, and their bodies were constantly heating up. This was the most fatal combination of cold and heat. And even without considering all this, the frostbite on their arms and joints would sooner or later force them to drop their weapons. Although I didn't know how much longer Cassio's group could last, Adam's group would definitely collapse first if they didn't do anything. After all, their opponent was Chaos War God Donati's actually sent his true body into the mortal plane? Is he that free? He even disguised his true body as an incarnation. What's so important that he's feeling so aggrieved? That's right, the reason why Adam's group of top-level semigods couldn't even defeat a main god's incarnation was because that wasn't a main god's incarnation, but rather a main god's true body. Not only that, Donatis had personally taken action, and had even disguised himself as an incarnation in order to reduce the attention of others. At this moment, it seemed as if all the clues connected. I suddenly raised my head and asked my own suspicions. Cassio, just what did you discover? Even a main god personally took action? Tell me the truth. Right now. My words caused the adventurers to pause in surprise. They exchanged glances as if they couldn't decide what to do. The next instant, Cassio was the first to make a decision. He gritted his teeth and also told me this important secret. Your Highness Roland, we met a human in the 6th level of the Chaos Abyss. A human who came from outside. Chapter 598. You're saying that he's a mortal plane resident that was dragged into a dimensional door? You met him in the 6th level of the Chaos Abyss? I recalled that the 6th level of the Chaos Abyss was also an ice hell. It was physically connected to the snow forest area in the 7th level. I would be far too slow if I still couldn't guess what had happened here. I was overjoyed. Perhaps I felt apologetic towards that unlucky individual. After all, there was a 99% chance that an ordinary person would die after entering the Chaos Abyss. However, his arrival provided me with incredibly important information: the coordinates of the dimensional battlefield in the mortal plane. Where's he? Is he with you? I glanced over the adventurers. The tiefling warrior had obvious inferno characteristics. It was highly unlikely that he was an elf mage or dwarf priest. I couldn't find him. Could it be that I didn't follow him? He's already dead. He died before we met him. Or rather, we only met his corpse. The dwarf priest retreated to my side. He had a full beard and a deep voice, making it impossible to tell his age or gender. More and more dwarves chose to have clean faces when considering other species' sense of beauty. However, it was perfectly normal for adventurers to have a full beard, especially when they were running for their lives. He's dead? Are you kidding me? Oh, I see. I was astonished at first. What would be the point of chasing after you if he was dead and there was no information? Then, I thought about it carefully. It would be strange if an ordinary person didn't die after falling into the ice hell. But in this world with magic, even if the person died, that didn't mean that the information would end. He left behind something? Yes. That was all I needed to say. The adventuring team before me was either incredibly unlucky, or they received a mission from a true god of order or Hades to search for that person's corpse and take his corpse's belongings. The corpse probably didn't have any obvious identifying characteristic. Otherwise, the dwarf priest would have long since reported this to the gods, and the search would have been completed. There would have been no need to take his corpse's belongings. But in this world with magic, as long as there were clues and powerful individuals willing to pay the price, even the dead could speak. Undead archmages would be able to summon souls, dimensional mages would be able to turn back time, the great drool would be able to sense souls, archaeologists and folklorists would be able to research, the gods would be able to use prophecy-type divine arts, and doctors would be able to dissect corpses. As long as they were willing to pay the price, coupled with the intervention of the gods, not only would they be able to find out where he was from, they would even be able to bring him back to life and force him to speak. It was obvious that the adventurer team had been through multiple battles, and they were covered in wounds and fatigue. It was very likely that they had been chased all the way. However, judging from their anger but not sorrow, exhaustion, and spirit, it seemed that they hadn't suffered a major defeat yet. At the very least, they hadn't lost any members. But right after they entered this city, even the Chaos War God came to find them. Seeing this, the Chaos main gods had already noticed that there was a possibility of information leaking out. They decided to personally come and kill these little insects. I didn't expect that the famous Prince Roland would personally come to receive us. My lord is truly looking after us. However, are our compatriots from the Passionate Knight Order safe? The Passionate Knight Order? That sounded like the rather famous Holy Knight Order in the Lanbing district. The moment I heard this name, I immediately recalled the nervous Holy Knight Order. Haha, I'm voluntarily taking the blame for someone else again? At this moment I understood everything. It wasn't Baena and the others who wanted me to take the blame. They had already arranged for the Holy Knight Order to come and receive us. It was just that I had too many years of experience with being scammed, so I thought too highly of myself and volunteered to take the blame. Donati's personally intervened because he couldn't do anything about the fact that information was about to leak out. In order to prevent anything unexpected from happening, Donati's personally intervened. He wasn't here for us at all. Perhaps he was quite surprised to see us here. Roland! Harlois, don't say anything. I know what you want to say. Life is just like an unopened box of chocolate. If you don't taste it, you'll never know what your next bite tastes like. Let bygones be bygones. You'll just have to get used to your dark history. I'm just asking you to hurry and help me. This boss is too powerful. I can't hold on for much longer. Alright then, it would seem that now wasn't the time for idle chatter. I would have to quickly deal with the problem before me. However, I felt rather fortunate as I looked at the still ferocious sailor, as well as the gigantic Chaos War God in the distance. Otherwise, if the reinforcements had encountered Donati's and Sailor, the entire Holy Knight Order probably wouldn't have been enough to deal with them, and the information would have been cut off. This guy is so thick-skinned. Even though Sailor was in a predicament where he couldn't even counterattack, he didn't seem tired at all. In fact, he seemed even more spirited than before. Even though he was on full defense, he was still full of energy. If this continued, these youngsters would probably be the first to be unable to hold on. Rather than worrying about the enemy before him, Sailor was actually more interested in the gigantic Chaos War God that suddenly appeared. He kept sizing up the Chaos War God with an unconcealable fear. That's right, in the 7th level of the Chaos Abyss, the devils and demons had just fought against each other. One side was Sailor's backer. Since Donati's had appeared here, it was only natural that he had something to do with the winner of that battle. It could be said that Donati's and I were now mortal enemies. If the current Donati's sees the battle between Sailor and us, what will he do? Will he directly kill Sailor? He'll kill you first. Think carefully about what you did to the Chaos War God. Who can compare to you in terms of aggro? What did I do? All I did was lock myself up in the Hades and release my dogs to beat up Donati's for several years. Then, I mocked him for being unable to even defeat my dogs. Finally, I casually tossed him into Mountain Paradise to enjoy some holy light barbecue. I suddenly felt that it would be strange if Donati's didn't kill me first. It would be better if I didn't kill myself first. However, the strange thing was that Harloise didn't seem to be as anxious as she had been earlier. She even had the time to comment on me. There seemed to be some unfamiliar noises coming from the other side. What's the matter? Did someone interfere? A bunch of idiots suddenly appeared. They're actually charging at Donati's. They're basically lining up to die. But, at the very least, we'll be able to hold on until they're all dead. Are those idiots shouting things like, "For the holy light," or "For our God's sake"? No, they're all gritting their teeth to die. It's just that they're shouting at us to take the item and leave first, and definitely deliver it to the correct location. They're using their physical bodies to challenge a main god without even trying to dodge. Tell me, are they all idiots? I was unable to comment on this. Even though this was clearly an admirable act of sacrifice, Harloise's words somehow made me feel rather amused. We messed with the wrong person to track us down, and ended up causing trouble for ourselves by fighting against such a terrifying opponent like Donati's. We even mistook Donati's main body as a clone. Meanwhile, these Holy Knight mistook Donati's for Donati's on the wrong battlefield, but ended up finding the correct opponent for Donati's. Why do I feel so conflicted? Why do I feel like I'm unable to be serious? You don't say. Even I'm confused when you're thinking too much. Relationships are so messed up. It seems that we can't let all these cannon fodder die yet. Adam, rest time is over. Go up and help out. Harloise's words were still echoing in my ears, but I had to speed up as well. Since people were dying every minute, it was only natural that rest time would end earlier than usual. It was time to deal with Sailor at all costs. Very few people knew that the fairy's ubiquitous newspaper company would sometimes act as a bounty hunter's mission distribution center. However, there were some missions that no one would accept, or that no one would be able to complete. These missions were known as lousy missions. The fairy's bounty list. Number 3 of the top 10 lousy missions. Most wanted criminal, Beifong Herald. Crime, Beifong. Crime, Beifong. For those who don't understand this term, you can check out the New Era Dictionary, official San Antonio edition. There's a detailed description of Beifong. However, minors and females should be cautious. Capture alive or execute. For the sake of world peace and your health, please kill him at all costs. We only accept the dead. We don't want him alive. Most recent location of appearance. Holy Land, Elven Origin, Lake Ardell. Victim 1, High Priest of the Silver Elves. The sacred lake is the holy land of all elves. Legends say that this is the place where the Mother Goddess created us. This is also the holy land where divine beasts and high elves bathe and worship the god. Yet, that bastard actually did such a disgusting thing in the sacred lake. He polluted the water source for over 100 days, causing several hundred divine beasts that bathe and drink in the sacred lake to accidentally become pregnant. Nobody dared to stop his disgusting actions. The high elf noblewomen and priestesses all received a major psychological attack. Many elves even voluntarily sought death. I, as the highest priestess of the Silver Elves, declare that as long as you can kill this demon, my race is willing to give you the position of a prince, 1,000,000 gold taels worth of art, and 2 god equipment. We only want him dead. Victim 2, High Priest of the Earth Mother Goddess. He actually dared to blaspheme the Mother Goddess in broad daylight. A stone statue of the Mother Goddess, and he was even able to cause the statue to become pregnant. This is Victim 3, High Priest of the Half-Deer, who was abandoned by Beifong. I was tricked by him. He said that he liked my strong body, but he actually only wanted me to become pregnant with his child. Yep, I'm a male. Alright then, victims 1 to 10, mainly because there were no more bounties on the wanted posters, all took out their entire life's possessions, including 7 or 8 god equipment. As long as they completed this bounty, it wouldn't be a dream to go from beggar to king overnight, when even the gods were tempted by the tremendous amount of wealth, and when the gods formed a team to punish Beifong, a certain person was finally unable to stay in the mortal plane any longer. He jumped into a certain dimensional door that led to the Chaos Abyss. Chapter 599. A cruel battle seemed to be coming to an end. The demon general who was surrounded was now covered in blood, as if he was a buffalo that was being bled by a pack of wolves. His gigantic and deformed body was covered in wounds, and blood kept flowing onto the metal streets of the ashen furnace. The young tiefling warrior, Arslan, revealed a delighted expression. He had been able to kill off a famous devil lord so easily. What kind of honor and glory would this be? He could already see himself becoming famous, and he would be able to return to his homeland in glory. Even the great demon god will be proud of me. Perhaps he'll even choose me to become a god's servant. Arslan's blood started to boil whenever he thought about being able to bathe in the great demon god's glory. As a mixed-blood demon who had lived in the Chaos Abyss for over 100 years and experienced countless humiliations, Arslan had never had a good impression of his relatives. In the eyes of demons and devils, these mixed-blood descendants were weak and lacking in potential. The demon bloodline was also naturally suppressed by the residents of the Chaos Abyss. It was quite normal for pure-blooded demons to call tieflings bastards. Casually insulting and killing tieflings was nothing more than entertainment. Apart from a very small number of tiefling residences, devils and demons were the most common residents in the Chaos Abyss. Arslan had already lost count of how many times he had been humiliated by demons and devils. Now that he had the chance to personally kill off a demon general, how great of an honor and glory would that be? Sailor's entire body was now covered in ice spears and arrows. He was basically a human target. The most dangerous injury he had received was directly piercing through his right eye. Pus and blood kept flowing out of that hole. If it wasn't for the fact that devils had strong vitality, Sailor would have died long ago. At this moment, an ice arrow suddenly changed direction and pierced into Sailor's left eye from the blind spot of his right eye. This time, Sailor was truly blinded. Sailor, I, Arslan Dimo, shall accept your head. Arslan roared as he jumped into the air. How could he possibly miss this opportunity to become a carp that leaped through the dragon's gate? That man had indeed said that he couldn't get close to Sailor without permission, but Sailor was now blind. How could he possibly become famous if he let go of such a good opportunity? Even though Arslan was a good teammate, how could he possibly give this opportunity to kill Sailor? Winna is still waiting for me back home. Once I become famous, I'll go back home and marry her. That headless corpse seems rather familiar. What are Cassio and the others shouting about? Arslan? Are you calling me? I'm dead? The tiefling warrior's head landed on the ground. However, it wasn't Sailor's head. The tiefling warrior's shocked expression indicated that he clearly didn't believe that he had died. The tiefling warrior that had been about to deal a fatal blow was instantly turned into a headless corpse. blood sprayed high into the air. Sailor had actually killed the tiefling warrior with a single blow. Hee, this is the first one where the devil's eyes should have been. There were only 2 ghastly holes. However, Sailor's face was filled with delight. He used the tip of his curved tongue to lick his dwarf-like, withered, deformed right hand, which was still steaming with the enemy's blood. He squinted his eyes as if he was very satisfied with the taste of blood. His relaxed expression made it clear that he was looking down on his enemies. When he opened his eyes again, his eyes had already regenerated, and the dim yellow pupils were filled with pride. It really is a trap, but that guy. I wanted to cry at the sudden and unexpected loss of a member. Didn't we say that we would surround Sailor and slowly whittle him down? Why was Sailor so innocently sending himself to die? Even if you really believed that Sailor was blind and intended to ambush us, why did you rush up to him and shout? Did you think that wasn't honorable enough? Or were you worried that Sailor wouldn't know where you were? Demons and devils all had powerful regenerative abilities. The higher level a devil was, the more difficult it would be for them to completely die. Although these ice arrows and ice spears were made out of extremely cold ice and wouldn't be instantly destroyed by Sailor's abilities upon contact, they were only ice weapons. They didn't have any special effects that would prevent regenerative abilities. The strongest member of Cassio's team was probably the fallen angel. However, she was only at the peak of Saint rank. She was still far away from reaching Myth rank. The difference between her and Sailor was even greater. If only Adam was here, a weapon's attack power was directly related to its user's power level. If I gave my ice sword to Adam to use, it would likely be Sailor's head that was chopped off. But if I gave my ice sword to these adventurers, they would probably only be able to bleed a little or pierce through Sailor's skin. They wouldn't be able to deal any fatal damage. And I didn't have any hopes that they would be able to kill Sailor. The mission that I had given them before was only to find out that Sailor didn't have any long-range attack abilities, so they would just circle around him and harass him. What if Sailor had long-range attack abilities? Not only would I not know how to summon these adventurers to battle, I would even run away by myself. However, Little Red's previous fight with Sailor had already revealed information about him. Now, it would seem that even though Sailor was covered in blood and seemed to be in a sorry state, it was mostly just an act that he wanted to bait others into taking the bait. I had already told them that there was such a possibility and asked them not to be too greedy. Yet, it just so happened that someone took the bait so easily. Even though they were all powerful individuals who had experienced countless battles, Cassio and the others were still visibly shaken after seeing their teammate die right in front of them. Their hands and feet trembled, and they made many mistakes. Sometimes, just being half a second slower could mean the difference between life and death. The worst part was that this warrior's accidental death caused an obvious opening to appear in our encirclement. I'm almost out of arrows. The ice swords of extreme ice were all from back in the day. There weren't many of them to begin with, and I hadn't prepared many sets for myself. Cassio was using them as if they were iron arrows, which meant that he was using even more ice swords. Plans would never be able to keep up with changes. Perhaps the moment that Cassio discovered that Donates was actually fighting in his original body, his original plan had already changed beyond recognition. Asterisk clang. Asterisk the ice sword and battle axe clashed once again. This time, the demon's sawtooth battle axe was frozen solid. It would seem that I would have to deal with this myself. Roland! Sailor's angry roar echoed in my ears as I swung the ice sword in my hand, which had already broken into more than a dozen pieces. I tossed it away and swapped it for a new one. In that instant, Sailor had actually swung his battle axe 9 times. His physical body's supersonic speed seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary. Sailor had truly hidden his abilities well. His malformed left side of his body had astonishing brute strength, while his malformed right side, which was viewed as a failed mutation, had astonishing speed. Sailor had a strange body, strange balance, bug-like special abilities, unpredictable attack methods, and the ability to kill in one hit. It was no wonder that even though Sailor wasn't a Devil Lord, he had the reputation of being undefeatable in melee combat against anyone below the main god level. I didn't have much time left. The battle over there was only becoming more and more intense. The gigantic Chaos War God was already destroying the entire battlefield. Perhaps it was time for me to make up my mind long ago. System, I'll give you Lasnina's Curse Stone as collateral. Exchange for that, for me. Chapter 600. Holy Light, do you see that enemy? I knelt down on one knee and devoutly prayed. However, I wasn't praying to any god. Pure holy light, the holy light of salvation, the holy light that could dispel chaos and restore order. I believed in the holy light just like how I believed in law. Power by itself had no justice to speak of. However, what power could bring about was where its value lay. The god of holy light, Roland, had brought holy light to this world. I looked down on this divine power server that had no sense of self. I was hostile towards the holy church that was blessed by the holy light. However, I had never looked down on holy light itself. That was because I knew the background and practical meaning behind the birth of holy light. In the endless darkness, pure light is the only hope for the weak. Even if the messenger who brought holy light has already changed, holy light still gives the world the power to protect itself. A golden glow appeared in my tightly clasped hands. The light of hope became the light of protection. However, this was only the beginning. I had read history before. Roland had brought holy light to the world. The Holy Church was born in the long history of the Holy Church. Holy Knight and Holy Light priests appeared from the Holy Church in order to dispel the endless undead and demons and to protect the weak mortals. I respected and even worshipped such a Roland as Roland. However, Roland had fallen. After he succeeded, he gave up on himself. That would be no different from death. What was even more fatal was that when Holy Light lost its sense of self, and when the Holy Church lost its just guide, pure authority finally transformed into excessive arrogance. The Holy Church and the teachings of Holy Light had already deviated from the original path of protection after the original sins erupted. Holy Light priests no longer did ascetic work in villages or in the fields, only to heal the farmers' illnesses from hard work or the warriors who protected the cities. Instead, they lived in extravagant cathedrals and enjoyed the farmers' offerings. However, they only performed baptisms and services for the nobles and kings, curing the minor illnesses that didn't matter much. The worst part was that at some unknown time, the Holy Church's authority had fallen into the hands of the cardinals. The cardinals who never left the Holy Church would be able to accumulate more merit points than those who worked on the front lines. The powerless who spent most of their time in the Holy Church would be able to reach higher ranks than those who worked on the front lines. The descendants of past heroes would rely on their bloodlines to stand above the Holy Knight and Holy Light priests who fought on the front lines. Devout faith and Holy Light divine arts cultivation would be replaced by complicated religious rituals. Hard work in battle would be no better than a few words of slander. 10 years of hard work in cultivation wouldn't be for the sake of flattery at a wine party. Holy Light was the foundational light of protection, yet the descendants of heroes would always forget about it. When the glorious figures on the stage of the Holy Church were just teachers wearing luxurious robes, when the Pope turned from a warrior into a politician who was good at opportunism, when the true warriors retreated to the rear because they were covered in blood and felt that they were unpresentable, did something change? Since there's no past, no present, and no future, then let us first trace the past, trace the essence of Holy Light. Roland's spear. The spear in my hand was a divine artifact that I had obtained from Astria. It was the tattered spear that the god of Holy Light, Roland, had used when he was still human. The sharp tip of the spear had already been blunted by the passage of time. The spear had no decorations, and was a pure mass-produced weapon. However, this spear had accompanied Ka Roland every single moment of his arduous search for the holy light. It was his weapon of protection that had helped him overcome all obstacles. It was the highest-level divine artifact that had been lost in the Holy Church's historical record. I held the spear, but I didn't intend to use it as a weapon. I sliced the tip of the spear with my finger, and the tip of the spear was incinerated by burning holy flames. The end of the spear fell to the ground. The sharp tip of the spear has already been corroded by the passage of time. However, this spear's handle can still represent the origin of holy light. The purest and purest spear had already returned to history. All that was left behind was the unassuming end of the spear. Myth-ranked weapons materials were quite important, but even more important was the concept that combined the materials and the concept. This was the theory behind creating myth-ranked weapons, as well as the source of their power. In the Hades, the light of salvation represented the concept of time. And the core concept of my holy light martial arts was naturally the process of holy light flowing through the river of time. That would be the past, present, and future of holy light. What could possibly represent the past of holy light more than the tattered remains of the origin of holy light? Holy light's past is the light of protection. It has always been so. But, even in the endless darkness of night, we Knight of Protection have never forgotten to seek the guidance of the light. I opened my tightly clenched hands, and the light of devotion ignited in my palms. The darkness of the chaos abyss was dispelled by a pillar of light that reached all the way to the sky. I loved history, because only by being familiar with history would I be able to understand the present. Even though the higher-ups of the Holy Church had already become corrupted, the Knight of Holy Light still carried out the original path of protection. Many years ago, the first batch of ancient Holy Knight had fought to protect their homeland and their people. Ever since then, every time the world met with calamities, the Holy Light Knight had never been absent. And in front of me, the ancient battle hammer that represented protection and salvation slowly floated in midair. When the holy flames that represented destruction and rebirth blazed on the war hammer, the god-equipment war hammer welcomed its own end and rebirth. My emotions were conflicted. I was in pain, but I was also delighted and delighted. Even though time has passed, the inheritance of Holy Light's path of protection has never been lost. Even if the Holy Light changes forms and self-destructs, the will of the path of protection will still be passed down. The raging holy flames dissipated, leaving only the battle hammer's silver head in midair. I let go of the spear's handle, and it automatically flew into the sky to clash with the hammer's head. Asterisk clang. Asterisk the sound of metal clashing sounded as pleasant and holy as a bell. However, the demons and demonkin around me felt pain as if they had been struck by lightning. The next instant, holy light lit up the entire world. Apart from the wielder of holy light, everyone lost their sense of hearing and sight. Sailor's eyes, which had just recovered, immediately self-destructed. Large amounts of blood burst out of his ears, and his body was filled with the smell of burning flesh. The unlucky demons that were caught up in the explosion were instantly vaporized. The demons that were further away probably managed to survive. Not only did the enemy receive a powerful blow, the purgatory centaur Cassio howls in pain as he lies on the ground. His purgatory magic runes and organs turn into black ashes under the light. That fallen angel curls up her black wings and cries. What flows down her beautiful face are drops of black blood tears. The fallen angel that is the incarnation of pride is filled with fear and despair, as though she is a helpless child who has encountered a hopeless situation. I could only helplessly shake my head as I glanced at her. Right now, I didn't have any extra energy to help anyone, nor was it the time to think too much. I reached out with my hand to receive the slowly descending ball of light. What is this? Sailor collapsed on the ground in pain. He still had the energy to ask his own question, but I had no intention of answering him. Even though my pierced ears and melted eardrums definitely wouldn't be able to hear anything, controlling 2 myth-ranked materials was already far beyond my limit. Speaking was nothing more than an extravagant dream. When I touched the ball of light, the light dissipated in an instant. What I held in my hand was a broken sword that only had a hilt left. The sword hilt was the spear's handle from before, while the upper part of the sword was the hammer's head. There were no decorations, nor was there any need for decorations. The sword hilt was simple and primitive, yet it attracted the gazes of countless supreme existences. I raised the sword hilt, causing an endless amount of light to rise behind me. It was as if a sun was slowly rising behind me. As expected, this is all I've got, even though I had already achieved the concept of creating a myth-ranked weapon. I lacked 2 core materials that would serve as the future of God equipment of light. That was why I was only able to create such a half-finished weapon. But this is already enough. The sword hilt slowly descended. There was nothing at the tip of the broken sword. The famous sailor was howling and crying in despair. He knew that the moment this broken sword descended, his death would arrive. The moment that I swung the sword, everyone's vision was blinded by the light again. When the light faded, only black ashes that represented Sailor's existence remained. A gust of wind blew away the ashes. The former general of the Blood Wars had now become history. Only now did I have the energy to answer Sailor's question and tell him the name of the holy light that I knew of. This is Dawn, the Holy Sword Dawn. Chapter 601. Light from the Brink, the Guardian War Hammer of the Dawn Envoy. This was the original name of this God equipment war hammer. In the endless darkness of night, the Holy Light Knight who brought hope to the mortals had the most glorious title of all. This was also the origin of this war hammer's name, which had evolved into a God equipment through inheritance. Perhaps this God equipment war hammer with such a long history was no longer around, but at the very least, the title of Dawn Envoy should be passed down through this holy light sword. The previous generation's Dawn Envoy was Estrada. This generation's Dawn Envoy, since he passed down his inheritance to me, it would seem that this Dawn Envoy would be me. The short sword hilt was even simpler than I had expected. It didn't even need any decorations. This sword contained history and inheritance, which was the ultimate glory. Of course, the Dawn Envoy's inheritance hadn't been cut off yet. It was just that the future inheritors would probably have to stop training with hammers and start training with swords. Why am I thinking so far ahead? I still don't know what happened that year. I shook my head. I didn't even have a single Holy Knight disciple. It would be far too early for me to find an inheritance when I was about to die. Should I first find some useful seeds and give them to whoever could survive the longest? I seemed to understand why Estrada had passed down his war hammer to me. All of his fellow disciples from back in the day had probably died. My Dawn Holy Light Sword doesn't count yet. I sheathed the sword hilt at my waist. It still lacked 1 main material and 2 core component. It was just like a machine that was missing a large part of its component. If I took it out to casually attack someone right now and it broke, I wouldn't even be able to cry. Even though it's just a spear that Roland used from back in the day, it actually cost me 150,000 fate points. What a scam. If I had a choice, I would rather wait until I had gathered all the necessary materials before crafting the sword. A half-finished product would always be in an unstable state. It wouldn't be a big deal if it had flaws in power and functions, but it would be a big deal if it became unstable to the point of exploding. Ever since I saw this spear in my system, I had long since chosen it as my most basic material. I had been saving up my fate points for this spear. If it wasn't for the fact that Las Nina had given me another 20,000 fate points, as well as the cursed gemstone as collateral, it would have taken me at least half a year to accumulate enough fate points. In the system, Astria still had a few such items, such as the crown of the ancient sea god, the demonic sculpture of the Troll Empire, and so on. Utility points sounded impressive and had a lot of history, but the original owners of these items had been dead for who knows how many years. Most of these items were useless and they were all extremely expensive. And since Astria was able to get a loan, the power of karma itself wouldn't be able to go back on its own. It was highly likely that Astria had received quite a bit of commission from him. Of course, she wouldn't admit it. If it wasn't for the fact that the gemstone was indeed attractive, she wouldn't even think about owing him the money. Looks like I'll have to earn some more points. Previously, Astria had always been urging me to go to the Chaos Abyss. She had even said something along the lines of, "Not only is Cavendish a child of the Chaos Abyss, who can become stronger in battle." Perhaps she had been waiting for this scene. Perhaps Roland hadn't had such a powerful cheat back in the day, which gave me the opportunity to kill enemies and accumulate fate points in exchange for materials that would allow me to quickly level up. Even more than that, it was because both Cavendish and Roland were split bodies of the children of the Chaos Abyss. I shook my head, deciding that I shouldn't think too deeply about such things. "Right, Astria, use the fate points that you just earned to pay me back. Return the gemstone to me." Sealing Losnina had given me 20,000 fate points, but killing Sailor had given me 40,000 fate points. This wasn't because Sailor was stronger than Losnina, nor did he have more connections. It was because Sailor had died even more thoroughly. Losnina had been sealed. Even if her seal was theoretically unbreakable, she hadn't died. High-level devils and demons would never die unless there were special circumstances. As for Sailor, Sailor no longer existed in this world. Holy light had always been the natural enemy of the undead, demons, devils, and other creatures of chaos. The foundation of their existence was the distorted power of chaos. Holy light would cleanse the distortions and expel chaos, which would be the equivalent of erasing the foundation of their existence. But in most situations, holy light would only be able to expel demons back to the lower planes. That was because a small amount of water wouldn't be able to extinguish a large fire. The foundational reason why devil lords and demon nobles were so difficult to destroy was because if an ordinary priest's holy light was like a bucket of water, then devil lords and demon nobles were like volcanoes. Not only would it be impossible to extinguish them with a bucket of water, even a god's downpour wouldn't be enough to extinguish a volcano. Apart from the difference in quantity, the most important reason was that all volcanoes originated underground, the endless chaos abyss. I had paid a tremendous price in order to obtain my Dawn Sword. This was the equivalent of using earthquakes to dig up the volcano's source, directly cleansing the volcano's source. Being able to do this was no longer just a concept of evolution. Using the enemy's existence as a clue, this sword could surpass all limitations and cleanse all distortions. If it wasn't for the time property, this would have been impossible. And the two major concepts of time and holy light had already fused together in hell, which was the theoretical basis for the creation of this holy light sword. Theoretically speaking, even devil lords and abyss princes wouldn't be able to live forever in front of this sword. That's right, this sword had been prepared specifically to deal with powerful demons and undead. As for who its ultimate enemy would be, that didn't even need to be mentioned. Based on its design, this sword didn't even have a blade that could normally injure others. This meant that if the enemy wasn't a demon or undead, it would be impossible for the sword to injure anyone apart from blinking. But if the enemy just happened to be a creature of chaos, Sailor would be the best experimental subject. It was fortunate that he was only a devil general. If he had been facing an existence on the level of a devil lord or a demon marquis, I wouldn't have dared to use this half-finished sword. It would be too late for regrets if this Dawn Sword collapsed. Now, in front of this Dawn Sword that was the natural enemy of all creatures of chaos, the Blood War General Sailor was directly cleansed. No matter how many tricks he had prepared to revive himself, it would be useless. That was because he had already been cleansed from his very source. If I could gather all the remaining parts of this sword, allowing this sword to truly possess its complete power and abilities, I felt that I could probably change my name to Ash Envoy. Wherever I went, the undead and demons would instantly turn to ash. I put away my dawn sword. The fallen angel and purgatory centaur still hadn't recovered yet. They had their teammates take care of them while they focused on the nearby battle. The gigantic war god was so familiar to me. Even the giant's roofs were destroyed by him. Sailor had given us plenty of trouble during the years we were in the Hades. Back then, the only ones he could play with were main gods that were thousands of years old or even tens of thousands of years old. Now we only had a bunch of semi-gods that were only several hundred years old. How were we supposed to fight against him? The hilt of my sword slowly glowed as a faint ball of light shot towards the Chaos War God. It was as if this newly born war god was asking me to fight him. Even if it wasn't completely finished, a true myth-ranked weapon would still have its own spirit and dignity. However, I unhesitatingly tightened my sash. Stop joking around. Even if you want to die, you should find a suitable opponent. Besides, it's not like you were created specifically for him. Donades was an evil god, not a demon. This was the true problem right now. Perhaps in the eyes of ordinary people, evil gods were no different from demons. However, chaos evil gods and order true gods were actually foundationally different existences. Their concepts were their own divine concepts and divinity. Fine then, perhaps some people could already tell that from a certain standpoint, chaos evil gods were also creatures of order. It was just that the chaos abyss had given them the power of chaos. Many evil gods had originally been order true gods. A god of darkness with negative traits was also an order true god? Could it be that darkness, violence, hatred, and assassination weren't concepts of order as well? If too much discipline was enforced, that would be tyranny. There was only a thin line separating justice from bloody revenge. If one slightly twisted their divine concepts and changed their names, that would be the evil god's true name. Strong gales at sea would cause fishing boats to speed up. Meanwhile, powerful gales would cause large ships to sink to the bottom of the sea. Lady Storm, who was feared by countless fishermen and sailors, had in the past been the protector of safety at sea and smooth sailing. Not long ago, the elf main god who had fallen to the chaos abyss had now taken over control of all fallen elves. His evil god priests were incredibly active in the underground world. My Dawn Holy Sword was used to cleanse distortions and chaos. Although evil gods had the power to distort order, their foundational source was still the concept of order. In order to defeat evil gods, I would need another sword, a magic sword capable of destroying all order. And that sword, if Dawn only had its hilt left, then the design for my other sword probably hadn't even been completed yet. What a headache! I'm meeting an opponent on the same level as the final boss right from the start. How am I supposed to play this lousy game? I helplessly facepalmed. No matter how I looked at my trump cards, there really wasn't a single one that could deal with Donades. If Donades had any weaknesses back in the day, he would have long since died in the Hades. Previously, when I fought against him in the Hades, I revealed many of my trump cards. Donades had seen all four of the new four main elements. As a warrior who had experienced countless battles, Donades would definitely have analyzed the new four main elements after his death. Donades also knew about the special traits of extended life. It would be basically unrealistic to try and trick Donades again. As for peace talks, when you mention the Hades, I recall that Donades summoned all his Valkyrie warriors to the battlefield back in the day. According to the rules of the Hades, not a single one of them should have been able to leave. The Valkyrie temple that had been built up over thousands of years was destroyed. Countless devout believers and god envoys all died mysteriously. No wonder Donades hates me so much. He's said many times that he wants to kill me. Now that he sees me, he probably has no other choice but to go all out. No matter how I thought about it, as long as I was here, peace talks would be impossible, but when I saw the adventurers who had become the fuse for the battle, an evil idea appeared in my mind. Perhaps I could change my way of thinking and try something new. Chapter 602. The Ashen Furnace, a city that had existed for countless years, was likely to meet its end today. That was because it had met with the most dangerous invader of all, Chaos War God Donati's. For some unknown reason, the gigantic Chaos War God was so furious. Every time he swung his black greatsword, not only was the Chaos Abyss unable to withstand it, even the entire city was trembling. The remaining power of the furious war god caused the gray sky to be torn apart. When the local residents discovered that Donati's was the one fighting, even the most arrogant demon overlord in the past hid his tail and pretended that he wasn't home. No matter who they are, they're all dead. Donati's name resounded throughout the entire abyss. Even the most ignorant demon would know of this Chaos Vanguard. While most residents of the Chaos Abyss closed their doors and windows and prayed that this battle of despair would swiftly pass, many tiefling thieves, demon warriors, and black knights hurriedly ran out of their homes. Some of them were believers of the Chaos War God, while others only hoped to be able to witness the battle between powerful individuals as close as possible. The roofs near the battlefield were filled with powerful individuals. Even the weakest were at the gold rank or above. As for why they were all powerful individuals, that was because the weak would probably be killed by stray bullets before they could even get close to the battlefield. Haha, I can't believe that we're actually able to witness Donati's glory in battle. Most of Donati's believers were battle maniac. A few years ago, Donati's had held a Valkyrie festival among his believers, where he would choose Valkyrie warriors and god envoys through battles. This actually made Donati's even more famous in the Chaos Abyss. It's a pity that we missed that opportunity. Otherwise, we could have become the Chaos Abyss's vanguard army as well. A fervent demon warrior was running through the streets. He was filled with a desire for battle as he looked at the Chaos War God's imposing figure in the distance. In his mind, no matter why Donati's was unusually angry, his opponent would soon be chopped up into mincemeat. If he was too late, he would probably never be able to see anything. But a surprising scene suddenly happened. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky and fiercely struck Donati's head. In the next instant, the huge giant suddenly fell to the ground like a dog sinking into the mud. The surrounding houses were all turned into ruins, dust and debris filling the sky, bringing up waves of air. Everyone who knew Donati's was astonished by this embarrassing scene. Who's that? Obviously, Donati's wouldn't fall on the ground for no reason. At the very least, his opponent wasn't completely defenseless. Actually, Donati's wasn't injured at all, even though he seemed so pathetic. In fact, he was laughing uproariously the next instant as he jumped up. Interesting. Powerful warrior, even an ordinary human, you're actually able to defeat me once. How delightful. Let me ask you one more time, are you willing to become my collection? We can travel through the endless plains together and enjoy eternal life and battles. The Chaos War God was still in high spirits even after being beaten up. This seemed rather inappropriate, but everyone in the mortal plane knew that the Chaos War God's greatest hobby was collecting powerful warriors from all the dimensions. According to the legends about the Chaos War God, he would often incarnate and appear in arenas and battlefields, giving astonishing rewards and glory to the unyielding warriors. At the same time, he would also punish cowards and deserters. According to the legends, there were countless powerful Valkyrie warriors in his Church of Valkyrie. They would eternally battle against each other to improve their martial arts technique. The number and quality of these warriors far surpassed that of other Chaos main gods. That's such a terrible way to ask a question. My wife is right next to me. On the battlefield, apart from the Holy Knight who had collapsed on the ground, there were a few people who were the most eye-catching. The one who had rejected the war god's recruitment with a cheeky expression was a red-haired young warrior. He was surrounded by flashes of lightning and fire. He stood in front of everyone and helped his companions block the wind from the giant god's collapse. Behind him was a mage who wore a cape and held a wooden staff. There was also a magic thief who wore leather armor and hid in the shadows. He never revealed his face. There was also a cute little girl who seemed angry. She also had the terrifying power of fire. Donades didn't want to fight anymore. It wasn't that he felt that he couldn't defeat them. It was that he cherished their talent. He felt that it would be such a pity to kill them off like this. The aura of one's soul would easily reveal one's true age. Donades' opponent was no older than 500 years old. 3 mages and this tenacious and outstanding warrior had actually fought against him for more than 10 minutes already. Donades' swords clashed several dozen times. Not only did this red-haired warrior not retreat, he even managed to defeat Donades once. Even if Donades wasn't being serious, this combat achievement would be more than enough for him to become famous in all the dimensional universes. A combination of lightning and fire elements? With your power level, you should have become famous long ago, but I've never heard of you before. Young warrior, tell me your name. After you die, I shall ask you again if you're willing to become my child. It was rumored that the Chaos War god Donades, the most outstanding warrior in the Valkyrie Shrine, had adopted Donades as his own. Now, it seemed that the rumors were probably true. Donades kept inviting Adam over and over again because the Valkyrie Shrine was now empty. Perhaps Donades was really excited to see that he could do such a thing. Me? Yep, my name is Dick. I'm Dick Khan from the Turkish district. Perhaps it was because powerful warriors appreciated each other, or perhaps it was because Donades sensed his sincerity. Even the normally impolite Adam had a serious expression as he told Donades his name. However, he unhesitatingly told Donades a fake name. Son of the Gull? I never expected you to be so much stronger than the rumors say. Donades nodded. He then stood up again and slowly unsheathed his sword. The Chaos War god was going to get serious now. No matter how much Donades admired Donades, Donades had no reason to retreat now that Donades was blocking his path. He would kill Donades later, use his true name to guide Donades' soul, and use his soul to reconstruct Valkyrie's body. However, Donades didn't know that Donades' mental connection to Donades was currently in a frenzy. Why didn't you tell him your real name? There's no need for us to hide our real names, is there? To be honest, he probably knows Roland and is quite familiar with Roland. How many people do you know who will grit their teeth in anger if I don't mention Roland's name? Marguerite thought about it for a moment before she unhesitatingly shook her head. 0, that settles it then. That bastard dragged me down so many times, so I should have learned my lesson long ago. Mysterious memories appeared in Donades' eyes. These were countless bitter memories. After being scammed so many times, Adam had learned his lesson as well. Then that Dion really exists, right? Aren't you scamming him? Does he owe you money, or did he slash you? No, he's far from being able to slash me. He slashed and once. When Anne was traveling, in the next instant, Margaret and Little Red exploded at the same time, their questioning thoughts exploding in Adam's head. Why didn't you say so earlier? That bastard. See if I don't roast him on a volcano for 300 years. Adam could only smile helplessly. He knew that this would be the result, which was why he didn't say anything. Hey, isn't this too unsightly? An adult intervening in a fight between children. You two are so immature. Shut up. After we take care of this big guy in front of us, we're going to deal with that bastard. I'm going to send him into the Earth's core to become a stone statue. However, Little Red was the first to realize this. Wait a moment, Anne's power level is quite high, and she doesn't like to cause trouble. Someone who can make her suffer losses can't possibly be someone of the same age as Anne, right? Why do you say that it's an adult intervening in a fight between children? If it's someone younger, this big guy in front of us probably doesn't know his name. Yep, that brat is probably more than 200 years old and has only reached the peak of saint rank. He actually dared to attack a 14-year-old girl? How unsightly. But is it impossible for you to take revenge? Why, he's dead? What did Roland do? From a certain standpoint, Little Red, who always messed around with Roland, understood Roland far better than Marguerite did. Roland's way of dealing with things was mostly to find out information from other sources, and then make the enemy suffer so much that they wanted to die. Him? How unspeakably pitiful. He was taken away by Pride Omar and trained for a year before being thrown to Eaglestorm. After training for half a year, he went insane and became no different from a wild beast. He jumped around in the forest naked like a gorilla, and was then taken away by Beifong. This is far more pitiful than being roasted on a volcano or petrified Earth's core. The two mothers were quite satisfied with Beifong's treatment, but someone finally couldn't bear to watch him get distracted on the battlefield. Hey, let's chat later. That big guy is watching all of you. The three of them turned around to see that Donati's was quite gentlemanly waiting for them to finish their conversation. Only when he saw that everyone's attention had returned to him did he start laughing out loud. It would seem that your combat meeting is over? I hope that you can come up with a sufficiently outstanding combat strategy. The warriors of the Chaos Abyss desired battle. The Chaos War God desired difficult battles that would satisfy him. For Donati's, what could possibly compare to a battle that would bring him new glory and scars? Donati's was the strong, while his opponent was the weak. If the weak wished to defeat the strong, they would naturally need strategies and tactic. And for Donati's, not only was strategy also a part of one's strength, even luck could be seen as combat strength. It was rare for Donati's to think highly of an opponent who might even become Donati's adopted son in the future. Giving Donati's more time so that Donati's could shine the brightest in battle was his responsibility as the war god. And in Donati's eyes, Beifong, who had always been calm, suddenly paused in surprise when he said this. Beifong then nodded with a serious expression. His eyes were filled with admiration and expectation, as if he also desired this glorious battle. Wait a moment, we still need to discuss this for 10 more minutes. We have a disagreement on our battle strategy. I swear on my honor as a warrior, Dick Kahn, that this will be a battle you'll never forget. Alright, I'll wait. And so, Donati sat down cross-legged and began to wait. Chapter 603. Warrior's Honor? What's that? It's probably something you brag about when you're drinking in a bar. For example, I killed an entire group of goblins in one trip. From a certain standpoint, Donati's had trusted the wrong person. Perhaps Adam was definitely an excellent warrior, but he definitely didn't have the so-called warrior's honor or knight's honor. He was a pure village boy, and the only adventuring team he followed was led by someone like Roland. How could he possibly have the mysterious honor of a noble knight or warrior? If he could win, he would fight. If he couldn't win, he would run. Was he supposed to fight to the death against a powerful enemy that he couldn't defeat for the sake of honor and honor? Perhaps that was the romance of nobles, but Adam had always been a freelance mercenary. Such an idiot would only become the favorite one-time use cannon fodder of his employers, and they wouldn't even need to pay him any fees. Back when he wasn't strong enough, he often lied, pretended to be obedient, and acted pitiful. But now that he was stronger, and considering that his enemies seemed to be even stronger, there wasn't much of a difference. Perhaps he would show his warrior's honor at certain times, but he definitely wouldn't do it for the sake of his enemies. 10 minutes. No matter how slow Roland is, he should be able to provide reinforcements by now. Then, shall we pretend to discuss something? Yep, if Roland still can't make it in time, we'll directly tell him that we have reinforcements and have him wait a little longer. Will that really work? Others won't mention it, but I think that this will work. Didn't you see how he even agreed to wait for us to discuss? Using that guy's own words, if you don't act cool and seek death, how can you make yourself look like an antagonist, boss? Doesn't that guy like to seek death as well? Yep, he even said that if an antagonist boss keeps seeking death and doesn't die, then he's no longer a boss. That's the main character. Alright, a certain person's perverted words had poisoned many normal people. Right now, the mage who was dressed like a female thief was mysteriously excited, as she would soon be able to see a certain someone again. It was just that a certain someone probably didn't want to see her at all, but sometimes plans couldn't keep up with changes. Only 3 minutes later, a sky-covering pillar of light announced a fundamental change in the battlefield. Holy light? In this city? Who died? Devil? Donates was not a fool. Before he agreed to wait, he had already confirmed that the paladin order that intercepted him had all fallen, and his target should still be in this city. And that holy light that reached the heavenly pillar undoubtedly meant that there was an extraordinarily powerful holy light user in this city, and the number of holy light users with such pure radiance in the multiverse could be counted on one hand. Roland, from a certain standpoint, Roland, who had just entered the middle stage of the myth rank, was indeed one of the strongest holy knight in the world. A powerful light source has its own color pattern, and a powerful power also has its own characteristic. After seeing the Hades, this kind of mutated pure light with a strange power of redemption seems to only belong to that man. Donates' statue-like face first changed. He seemed to be overjoyed, but also hesitant. Being able to meet Roland here was indeed a surprise as well as a pleasant surprise. However, Roland wouldn't be so easy to deal with. In the Chaos War God's mind, perhaps Roland's power level wasn't even at a semi-god's level yet, but Roland was indeed as dangerous as a main god. After all, this was no longer the first time a main god had lost to Roland. Donates' first thought was that this was a trap, a bait specifically targeted at him. But the next instant, he noticed that Dion and his companions suddenly appeared before him, and he finally knew that something was wrong. Red Lotus hero Adam Han? The information about Roland's comrades wasn't a secret, nor was it likely to become a secret. Roland's fiery red hair was also his signature. Donates wouldn't have thought of it if Donates didn't mention it, but now that he thought of Roland, how could he not guess? Marguerite? Ein Mises? When Donates recalled that Roland had brought a group of people with him, he realized that he had been fooled. Not only that, the person who had just fooled him was the comrade of his mortal enemy. Donates' expression became quite grim. All right, we've all underestimated him. Roland's reinforcements haven't arrived yet, but he's already tricked you. From a certain standpoint, Roland had successfully accomplished something new. He had tricked his comrades without even appearing. Not far away, the pillar of holy light was still dispelling chaos. Even the war god was surprised by the abnormal, holy light. The giant god stood up again and viciously glared at Adam, who was currently smiling foolishly. This time, he wouldn't hold back at all. Please, all of you, die once. The information you have is more important than your own lives. While the adventurers were rejoicing that they had luckily survived the battle against the demon general, while Cassio had just recovered from his holy light attack, and while Ivla was still trembling, I said this. The next instant, everyone picked up their weapons and looked at me with wary expressions. Didn't I make myself clear? You've all seen that big fellow over there, Donates. You should all know just how strong and difficult he is to deal with. And he's chasing after you. In that case, as long as you all die in front of him, he'll naturally treat it as a mission accomplished and return to his divine kingdom. Of course, I still need someone to give me the item. Alright then, this time, everyone really did draw their swords and magic staffs. They were all chanting incantations. So, you're going to sacrifice us? As servants of our goddess, returning to her due to a noble mission will be the highest honor. But, as a member of an adventuring team, as a priest, I can't just watch as my teammates die in front of me. The bearded dwarf priest who had been smiling just a moment ago now had an expression of anger. He kept swinging his black iron warhammer, but his technique was truly lacking. The elven mage didn't say anything, but he lightly chanted an incantation to express his decision. Is this my fate? As expected, I can't escape it. Come, take it. Since this is my fate, at the very least, my death will have meaning. The first to respond was the fallen angel who struggled to get up. She had an expression of despair, but her trembling voice contained a shred of resolution and hope. Don't be foolish. His Highness Roland isn't such a person. Let him finish. However, Cassio, who had fought with me before, understood me quite well. I nodded and snapped my fingers. Youngsters don't have any patience at all. Harlois, give me a few clones to use. I walked over, picked up the tiefling warrior's severed head, and placed it back on his head. After that, black magic representing death was infused into the tiefling warrior's body, and he regained the ability to move. Then, several dozen slimes combined and clashed with each other, creating humanoid shapes as if they were made from plasticine. Finally, they took on the appearance of Cassio and the others. It was far too easy for Harlois, who had the ability to transform herself at will, to use her clones to create several humanoid shapes. Actually, if it wasn't for the fact that Harlois strongly objected to this, I had even intended to use the slimes for commercial purposes. I wasn't going to break the law. I was only selling labor. Did anyone think otherwise? If everything you say is fake, Donati's will be suspicious as well. I'll make you die so horribly that not even your corpses will be left behind. However, his corpse will appear in front of Donati's. All you need to do is find a place to hide yourselves, and don't come out until everything is over. You can keep the item for yourselves. After saying that, I immediately turned around and left, with the wobbling flesh figures following behind me. You did that on purpose, didn't you? Although Harlois didn't say it explicitly, both of us knew that she was referring to using words to intentionally cause Cassio and the others to misunderstand. Harlois knew that Roland definitely did that on purpose. She wanted to know why he did that even more. Of course, my verbal skills aren't that bad. It's best to see a person's true nature when they're on the line between life and death. I still have some trouble on my hands, but I also have some benefits. It'll just depend on whether or not they're lucky. It seems that you're quite satisfied with the test results? It's alright. If they casually abandon their companions, it would be a good choice to casually kill them off. I'm telling the truth. The value of the information they have is far greater than their lives. It's best to prepare more words to say about how you treasure your companions. Say them more later. What? That's because your companions have already exploded in anger because of you. They're all cursing Roland for being such a lunatic. If you're in such a hurry, why don't you just die earlier? Congratulations, your professional ability to make your companions suffer has already been recognized by the system and fate. Do you prefer the title of "I've been digging holes for 300 years", or "So what if I'm an elementary school student? I want to be a mid-laner. If you don't give it to me, I'll give it to you." Chapter 604. Even if I didn't personally witness it, I basically knew what was going on in this city based on the information I received from Harlois. Chaos War God Donati's explosive aura, as well as his killing intent that was directed directly at me, was the best explanation. TSK, you recognize me now? As expected, being too famous isn't a good thing. It should be said that I've offended too many people and made too many enemies. Adam was already having a hard time, and now Donati's seemed to be going berserk again. In that case, what I needed to do right now was turn around and run. That's right, if I couldn't win, wouldn't I just be waiting to die if I didn't run? I didn't say anything else as I spread out my wings and immediately ran away with my minions. Roland. Just as I expected, Donati's unhesitatingly gave up on fighting the enemy he was currently fighting and flew towards me as soon as I was far away from him. Compared to an enemy who came out of nowhere, I actually had a deep grudge against Donati's in the Chaos Abyss. Naturally, this was an even rarer opportunity. I knew that Donati's, who had come to this city all by himself, would definitely make such a decision. For a main god, the physical distance between them was practically meaningless since they could see each other. The next instant, the gigantic main god in the sky came crashing down like a mountain. All of you, hurry and escape to the teleportation portal. I didn't even have time to worry about myself as I ordered the adventurers with the precious treasures to hurry up and escape. This was the largest city in the 100th level of the Chaos Abyss. Even if it didn't have a teleportation portal to the mortal plane, it would at least have teleportation portals to other levels of the Chaos Abyss. And as long as one entered a teleportation portal, it would be quite difficult to find them again. However, my actions attracted Donati's attention. He looked at where he was pointing. Wasn't that the adventurer team that I was supposed to be targeting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not a single one missing. This was an unexpected surprise. But before Donati's could do anything, a golden holy light bullet already blocked in front of him. Asterisk boom. Asterisk continuous explosions covered up everything as I, the war angel incarnation, blocked in front of the gigantic main god. Evil. Don't even think about taking another step closer. As long as I'm still standing here, kill them and your evil plan will be ruined. Donati's fell silent. In the next instant, a scream came from behind him. When he turned around, he saw that the adventurers had already been ambushed. The centaur archer had been smashed to smithereens by black magic, while the tiefling warrior had been beheaded by an assassin. Believers of the Fallen? That's right, they were the Chaos War God's believers. There were many believers of Donati's in this city as well. In the past, they had been the war god's eyes. But now, under the war god's summons, they had become his sharp blades. I tried to turn around to help, but this time, the black greatsword blocked my way. Roland, perhaps it's time for us to settle our old debt. This time, I was the one in danger. Fight to the death with the Chaos War God? Even though I was one step closer to semi-god rank thanks to my Dawn Holy Sword's creation, before I truly reached the peak, fighting against a main god alone wasn't an option. I, Roland, was someone who had leveled up to 9,999 in order to challenge a level 50 final boss. Then, I would grind through all the hidden bosses and weapons and equipment until I couldn't level up any further. Only then would I be able to defeat the final boss. Behold my Dawn Holy Sword. I unhesitatingly unsheathed my sword and summoned holy light at full power. The entire sky trembled as a pure halo of light spread along my holy sword. It was as if a sun was slowly rising behind me. The scene of me instantly killing sailors several minutes ago replayed itself. Holy light. Hear my command, evil smashing slash. But this time, I didn't gather holy light to slash at my enemy. When a sky-covering pillar of light appeared again, even Donati's had to be on guard. And then, there was no one left in front of me. Holy light is also quite useful as a flash grenade. Meanwhile, on the ground, although the war god believer's encirclement was successful, the remaining adventurers still managed to break out of the encirclement. This was especially true for the winged fallen angel, who was about to disappear from sight. Teleportation ability? Damn it. Roland was instantly unable to find his target. His target was right in front of him. It was still acceptable for him to slack off earlier, but it would probably be rather embarrassing for him to watch his target escape just like that. In Roland's mind, it didn't matter even if his information about Roland was leaked. Perhaps he would have an even better time fighting as the vanguard. However, the air around him was filled with an uncomfortable aura of holy light. It was impossible to find Roland. By the time Donati's finally decided to kill the adventurers, Roland had already disappeared without a trace. I had just met up with Adam and the others. My first reaction was to turn around and leave Roland. The clear female voice behind me sounded so familiar, but I would rather not remember it. Didn't I tell you not to let her come? How did she survive in the land of spring? Are you an idiot? She's a demon, and this is the Chaos Abyss. She might need to think about how to get to other places, but here she can just directly answer the summons of the Chaos Abyss and return. The will of the Chaos Abyss is already dead, yet it still has such a function? You can ask her personally. No matter what, she's your girlfriend. Is it really all right to ignore her after traveling so far to come here? That's too heartless. I could only helplessly turn around and force out a smile as I looked at the woman who was treating me like a junior's daughter. Suddenly, my eyes lit up. Long time no see, Eliza. Is this Lisa's equipment from back in the day? This brownish-yellow leather armor wasn't particularly well made. It only had simple two-circle arcane spells, such as secondary acceleration and precision. That was because Marguerite's craftsmanship back in the day could only be considered third-rate. However, this leather armor was a Dragon Brand item, which would be quite good for a novice adventurer. I recalled that this relic should have been left in the Underground World's library back in the day. Since she obtained it, that could only mean, where the hell did I go? You went in? I covered my face. That library was probably still under my old residence in Sulphur Mountain City. It was impossible to enter without the secret key. As for my secret key, in order to avoid forgetting, it should be something even more foolish than using your birthday as a password is using your own name. Considering your astonishing memory, I only needed to try 3 times before entering. Relax, I didn't read your diary. I'll take care of my privacy. Besides, there were so many diary entries. Even if I wanted to read them all, I probably wouldn't be able to finish them. You should just read them. Just read them. When the drawer in which you kept your diary was opened, and your mother helped you clean up but said that she didn't read the contents of your diary, would you believe her? That's so embarrassing. Why didn't the tower spirit self-destruct? Such an important database would naturally have a backup plan. If an outsider went in, the tower spirit would definitely self-destruct. That tower spirit? He said that I was on the visitors list. I was on the visitors list when I was 1 year old. I wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Now that she mentioned it, I recalled that back in the day, I was a single father raising a little girl, and I couldn't rely on undead nannies. Not only did I feed her milk and take care of her, I even had to personally change her diapers. Back in the day, no matter where I went, I would always bring the diary with me. It was probably because I brought it into the library that I registered it for her, and because the mechanical tower spirit overreacted, I forgot to cancel it for her. I never expected that I would open the door to a thief. Now, I could only pray that she hadn't stayed in there for too long and hadn't seen those messy things, such as the original draft of my romance novel that I had written out of boredom, or the adult Yuri novel that I had placed on the table to exchange for money. Damn it, I didn't expect that there would be so many dark secrets from back in the day. Nova angrily glared at Kyrian and said, "You damned girl, you didn't even see me in the middle of the night. You must have gone to fool around with Jaina again." She read it. As an author, the most intolerable thing was for someone to read the lines of their original work in front of them. I was rolling around on the ground out of embarrassment, while Eliza smiled proudly. Eliza knew that after this commotion, it was likely that Roland would no longer be able to chase us away since he had lost all his dignity. With so much information on me, I wouldn't have to worry about Roland acting like a senior and being unreasonable. I was still in a state of depression and regret, but the furious giant god seemed to be reminding me that this wasn't a place for idle chatter. If we all attacked a main god at this time, perhaps we could win, but at least some of us would die. No matter how I thought about it, it wouldn't be worth it. Let's find a safe place first. Soon, the adventurers, Harlow's clones, would be forced to the brink and choose to self-destruct, leaving behind only their corpses. However, we wouldn't be able to find much information about them. All we needed to do was think of a way to take the real adventurers away. And from the moment that Roland came into contact with the adventurer team that obtained military secrets, it would be quite easy for the secret to be leaked. And as long as the secret was leaked, there wouldn't be much meaning in chasing after the adventurers or investigating the authenticity of the corpses. In that case, Donati's would no longer need to worry about anything else. He would be so busy that he would have to leave sooner or later. And as long as the main god wasn't here, who would we be afraid of? Roland. I decided to let him shout all he wanted while I went to find a place to rest.